These are the days where the news is just, ugh.
Yeah. All right. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm reading through.
Gotta do the music. We'll wait for people to come on. We don't have anyone on yet. Scarlett, were you able to add your Twitter feed?
I could. Do you see it?
It said it was disconnected. Did you re-add it or no?
Yeah, I did.
All right, let me check. Oh, yeah. It says StreamYard lost access to your Twitter account. Yes, I sent you a message earlier about that you had to get.
Yeah, and I added it.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan Knodl's here, guys.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, good.
Outstanding. All right, Dan, if you can hear us, give us 1 minute to do the intro, okay? And I'll bring him in.
My Twitter should be added now. Do you see it?
Okay, hang on.
Hey, we got 23 people watching here, guys.
I know.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. So, I mean, we do want to talk about Trump and the indictment tonight. That's the big news, so stick with us. We do have Dan Knodl here first, and Henry Perez. We have a lot of, we have a good lineup for you tonight. And then obviously the news intervene, right? There's this massive breaking news story.
Yeah.
They're the first time ever in the history of the United States that a former president has been criminally charged. And we obviously want to talk about that. We want to give everybody a chance to talk about that. Everybody a chance to weigh in the comment thread on that. I'm sure a lot of people want to vent. If I had a radio show, I would have just said vent. Hey, everybody just vent. I'm going to open up the phone lines, just have at it, let it out,
Yeah, let's.
You can do that in the comment thread.
And
yeah.
For people listening, we definitely want to hear from you tonight. So comment on your thoughts. We're going to first open it up, a couple comments about Trump, and then we're going to swing into our interview with Dan Knodl. But again, President Trump has been indicted, and now CNN's reporting over 30 counts related to business fraud.
Your music is still on.
I'm sorry?
The music is still on.
And I have a lot to say. There's so much emotion surrounding all of this with Trump, and I kind of wanted to inject some analysis and facts into it. And, we can maybe start with that and then swing back to it after we're done with, Dan Knodl.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to unpack on it.
There's a lot to say. Also, Ron DeSantis issued a statement saying that he will not work cooperatively with the Justice Department or the DA, the New York DA. And he got that statement out right away.
Well, Ron DeSantis is in a tricky position, right? He's obviously the, what would we say? The beneficiary, arguably, of this, because he obviously perhaps wants to run against Trump in a primary. And yet he was really slammed by a lot of people for not coming out, more strongly on the front end before, when Trump came out and said he was going to be arrested. Some people thought that DeSantis was too lukewarm. His comments were belated, and he's in this really tricky position. I read the tweet that you're talking about, Scarlett, where he basically said he will not assist, the state of Florida will not assist the Manhattan DA in extraditing Trump if it were to come to that.
Yes.
I've been reading a lot of analysis about this, though. And I think the Constitution says that states have to extradite to other states. I don't know that he's legally going to be able to do that.
And
I noticed the semantics in his wording where he said, won't assist.
Yes.
So it'll be an interesting legal question.
I also disagree. I don't think he's the beneficiary of this. I think this is the last thing the DeSantis team wants, because it basically rallies Trump supporters around him. And now Trump is a central figure of the news. I think it throws DeSantis sort of off a little bit. It makes it hard for him to mount any sort of criticism of Trump right now. I think this is something that the DeSantis team doesn't want. A lot of tweets went out once this broke, including Dan O'Donnell, that said this basically seals Trump's nomination. This indictment seals his nomination. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that this is something DeSantis doesn't want because it shores up a lot of support for Trump that were, people that might sort of be, not sure, they are going to rally because what they see this injustice.
Okay.
I think we should take Representative Knodl.
Yeah, I think so. Let's bring Dan Knodl on, and then let's get back to the Trump issue after done. He's
yeah,
waiting. Okay,
yeah. There's a lot to say about Trump. I want to get back to that too afterwards.
Yeah. Good evening, Representative Knodl. Thanks for joining us.
Well, good evening. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Hi. How are you? First of all,
I'm doing fine.
Any comment on the news today?
I cannot say I have comments. I've been pretty disconnected from national politics, so zoned in and focused on the campaign that I'm currently in, and am challenged even with time to stay on top of the state legislative issues that are going on. I'm engaged, but the national issues, other than trumped up charges for Trump, I can't say I'm have much more than that.
Well, let's switch to your race. This is a really important, Senate race. Obviously, you're running for the Alberta Darling seat. She was obviously a beloved Republican for years and years in that district. It's regarded as almost a swing district, perhaps, although I know that it's gotten more Republican slightly over the years. Is that true? Like, what's the breakdown of this district, and how does it compare to the past?
Well, this district has gone through quite a few changes. More recently, it has trended a bit more Democrat. However, the North Shore of this district, which goes from the North Shore communities along Lake Michigan out west and to Washington County to Richfield and Erin, where you're very red territory out there. But the Eastern Seaboard, if you want to call it that, has trended much bluer over the years. Used to be the original Republican bastion of the state of Wisconsin, the North Shore communities, but that is not the case anymore. So with this effort for Senate, it'll be interesting to see if the trend line has leveled off, or will this district trend or continue to trend a bit more blue than it has been in the past.
Dan, can you share with us any internal numbers on how you're doing?
I don't have any polling directly to me. Some general polling that is looking more at the statewide race for Supreme Court. This district for me still tilts Republican. We look in fall. Tim Michaels carried 51% in this Senate district, and Ron Johnson got 54% in the Senate district. The wild card here is this is a special election in the spring, so it's a bit unprecedented to have a special election for a state Senate seat at this point in time and this time of year. So it's still going to come out to who's going to show up.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, you'll be tethered somewhat to the turnout in the state Supreme Court race then.
Sure. We believe, and Ron Johnson has made this statement repeatedly, that he feels the local races, particularly state assembly, state senate, can pull turnout. I think we're seeing that now, even on the more local level, school board and local level races, because they're working so hard, that are going out there recruiting the votes for them. That will help with turnout, and then it will flow up ticket. And so I think my race and those local races can be effective in helping Dan Kelly with turnout.
Yeah, I believe that the school board elections are helpful for Dan Kelly because unlike previous years, conservatives are very invested. I know Moms for Liberty, we've got a very extensive list of candidates that we're endorsing, and all over the different counties have recruited really good candidates for school board. Very excited to. There's a lot of districts across the state that are in red areas, but they have very progressive, woke school boards that do not match the population. And I think we're going to see some big flips. Hope like Sheboygan is one area. Wauwatosa would be amazing. There's and the list goes on. There's a lot of good candidates out there. Our district. I voted for you already. I voted early. You saw my husband earlier today,
Right.
and I encourage everyone. There's one last day of early voting tomorrow. So if you are upset about the Trump indictment, the best way you can protest is to go out and vote. Because the last thing that these Democrats want is for Dan Kelly and Dan Knodl to win and for our school boards to continue to turn more common sense conservative and less woke. So that is the best way that you can protest and have your voice be heard is to vote. So, and tell others, if you know some people that they're very disgruntled, they're very unhappy with what's happened to former President Trump, let their voice be heard through their vote. Don't stay out of this one. Like Mark Bellion said today, all hands on deck. But I was at your debate yesterday, Dan, and as you know, my blood was boiling.
Let me give you a light here so I can be seen. Okay.
Sure, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. We can see you.
Okay.
How did you feel? You did a great job. I thought, first of all, I want to say that it was a very well run debate, and I know that our friend Cheryl did a great job, and she worked with someone else who I can't remember, Mary, and they did a really good job yesterday. But how did you feel about the debate?
The debate was well run, much better than past debates that I have been in. So I certainly appreciated that, because the other side is known to have kind of a gang mentality showing up at these events, and can get a little out of hand, jeering and heckling and things like that. But we did not see that. There was a couple minor instances, and where the moderator was very good about tamping that down. So
Yes,
we could focus on the issues. It was very a civil debate. There was my intention to keep it and be that way. I wasn't going to come in and throw bombs and things like that, because this would probably turn around on me, and would be putting out material for the left to use and creatively.
Your opponent is Jody
Habesh-Sinekin, correct?
Yeah.
Why don't you make the case for us, Representative Knodl? Like, why should people vote for you, including moderates, including even conservative Democrats? You know, why should people vote for you in this race? And it's the 8th Senate district, correct?
Correct. The 8th Senate.
Yeah.
You mentioned Alberta Darling earlier, longtime state senator in this district, and she was well received and well respected. She was certainly conservative principles, and we aren't ever going to cave and give up on our conservative principles. However, she was known to have an open mind, to listen and have conversations with all. And I think I'm in that same vein, and that has spilled over into my past elections. In 2020, Joe Biden won my assembly district, but I won as well. So these were people, particularly Trump-hating moms, suburban moms that weren't going to vote for Trump, but yet they knew me. They knew I was reasonable minded. I had built relationships up over the 14 years that I've been in the legislature. So they were comfortable voting for me. And that's going to be an important position by come Tuesday to see if that will still be in place and help me over to the finish line.
And I was very surprised to hear her say that she talked a lot about crime, and one of her major themes was how she wanted to fund the police, and that Republicans over the last 15 years had not properly funded the Milwaukee police and several other of the areas across Wisconsin. And she came out as a very strong proponent, supposedly, of the police, and she made several unfactual statements that I thought that you should definitely go on the record. And I just was very surprised to hear her say that, knowing that over the last 3 years, the drumbeat of Democrats in Wisconsin has been defund the police. They have gutted the police departments, and I'm sure, Jim, you could speak to this more than I. That's one of the areas where my blood was boiling, that she actually blamed Republicans for something that in no way is the fault of Republicans and our current state of the police, especially in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and this is typical for the Democrats to at least in the campaign cycle to be that way. I even think I mentioned it to her that she sounded Republican.
Uh-oh, where'd he go? Well, he's right. I'll pick up that thought. I mean, the Democrats always remake themselves. Oh, you went in and out, but I'm kind of picking up your train of thought real quickly here. I know what you're saying. At election time, all the Democrats become pro-police briefly, for 2 months or whatever, until they're not again. And this is their line that, like, basically, oh, it's the fault of the Republicans in Madison. No, it's their own fault because they have misplaced priorities. And until election time, they have been ranting and raving about defunding the police and having unarmed social workers take calls and on and on and on. And then they want to do this about face to the voters and lie to the voters that they're somehow tough on crime come election time. And so I'm glad you're calling that out.
Yes. And I would love for her to publicly say and rebuke the party, the Democrat Party, nationwide and in our state, and rebuke them and say, no, I support funding the police, and I reject the Black Lives Matter radicals that claim that we should defund the police. I stand against that. She would never do that publicly because that would put her in a very precarious position with her entire party in the state. But I just found it very disingenuous that she tried to come off as a hawk and that she wanted to cut taxes, and that Republicans apparently have not cut taxes enough.
Sure. Well, and then the tax issues, it's amazing how they are all want to be tax cutters and tax reformers come campaign time. And even Governor Evers, and he's turned that into his advantage. He did not have any tax cuts in his the current budget we're under. We put the tax cuts in the budget. He did sign a budget into law, but that's turned around and took credit for those tax cuts on the campaign trail. But that is, he has that bully pulpit to do that. So, but the campaign time, it's very disingenuous, and to take my opportunities to call them out on it when I mentioned the endorsements that I have from the Wow County sheriffs and from Law Enforcement Milwaukee Police Association have all endorsed me, and she doesn't have any of that support. No. She has Senator Chris Larson, who was one of the initial characters in defunding the police.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your business background? I read a bio of you in which you were talking about, I think you said you'd been a small business owner for 40 years or something like that. And I was wondering if you could tell people a little bit more about who you are and your business background.
Well, my first business was when I was 17 years old. I had bought a food truck before food trucks were cool. or thing. There was called a popcorn truck. And so I was the guy driving around the neighborhoods selling popcorn and snow cones and cotton candy and ice cream at age 17. But a very eye-opening experience to have a business and have to go through government regulation, even for something that small. But I did learn the value of hard work, of paying the bills, and there's a lot of dignity in owning a business. Sweat equity. Learned all about sweat equity at that point in time, and I've been in business really ever since, with different, generally in the hospitality and real estate areas.
And you have how many children?
4 children and 4 grandchildren, and another on the way, which I referenced last night in the abortion issue. So that, which is really the Democrats' only issue that they want to discuss, unless they're in a debate forum where they need to actually address some other issues or try to. And so that was an important point for me to make about my daughter being 15 weeks pregnant, and that there's more than one life there that we need to protect. And it amazes me to this point in time how cold and callous that the Democrats can be. They won't even recognize that there's another life there. They simply dismiss it. And it's unconscionable. I say that, but that is the way they operate. I even had people rolling their eyes in that audience last night when I mentioned there's another life there that we need to focus on as well, and have equal protections for the mother and for the baby.
And they also will not give you a timeline. They will not say there's a cutoff point. At one point, because you asked that many times, at what point does the baby in the mother's womb have rights and afforded those rights, equal protection under our Constitution, which that's an oath that you take, and that's what you said.
Right. Yeah, and it was never answered. There's no answer there. Certainly, which means they're good with abortion on demand till birth, partial birth abortion. We had a bill that Governor Evers vetoed last cycle, that if a baby were to be born after a botched abortion, born alive, that mandated the doctors to perform, as they take their oaths, life-saving measures to keep the baby alive. And Governor Evers vetoed that. So it just shows you to how far off the mark they are here, and their lack of concern for life.
Yes.
Dan, moving forward, how do we handle, as conservatives, the Republican Party, how are we going to take abortion out of the hands of the Democrats as a weapon to use against us? We saw it in the governor's race. We're seeing it in the Supreme Court's race. What do you see moving forward, how we can negotiate the issue or, again, disarm it?
Yeah, well, to me, it means we should put some legislation on the governor's desk. We've got to call them out. We've got to pin them down to see where they really, how far how cold and callous they really are. And instead of mothers who can't or don't want, are unfit or not prepared to be a parent, they can be heroes by having those children be adopted. And it's just never mentioned. So that is our realm, is to put legislation on the governor's desk and to call him out where he's at. I brought that up last night by signing on to this legislation that we currently have that is just starting, and the governor called it DOA upon introduction. So that's not working together. That's not looking for a compromise position. So we're going to have to be the moving body to put something on his desk and see what he does.
And where do you draw the line? With abortion, is there any wiggle room with exceptions, in your opinion? Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, the current bill that we have introduced has exceptions for rape and incest. Yeah, I think there does need to be some further defining of abortion versus other medical procedures. Right now the doctors are skittish, and perhaps rightly so, that they're performing if a pregnancy is imminent for a miscarriage or a death before the baby is fully developed. There are medical procedures available. The law currently in place protects the life of the mother. A medical procedure can happen to protect the life of the mother right now, and but they don't reference it that way. I referenced it specifically a number of times that what the current law provides for protections. They turn it around and say it makes mothers and doctors criminals for performing these procedures, which in fact that is not correct, unless it's a procedure that's an abortion on demand, abortion being used as birth control. And that's, they won't even talk it as abortion anymore. It's the health choices of the mother.
And, she never referenced, when she talked about bodily autonomy, she failed to say that she would be against mandating the COVID vaccine or any vaccines. So while on one hand, she claims to be a champion for bodily autonomy, yet she, I believe, would likely support Evers if he were allowed. If that had been something he would have been able to do, he would have mandated the COVID-19 vaccine just like they did in other states. And he failed to protect healthcare workers who were mandated. How many nurses, how many doctors had to leave their profession because they did not want to receive a vaccine that is ineffective. And frankly, from what we're seeing, could very, I don't want to make unfactual statements, but there's a lot of questions about the efficacy and the safety of the vaccine, considering that it was manufactured at warp speed without proper trials, and they bypassed a lot of things that would protect those of us who many of us were required to receive it. Luckily I wasn't, but I know many people whose jobs were on the line and they felt they didn't have a choice. And that's terrible. So that's one choice that she would not support.
Yeah, they're hypocrites. They're all about it. In this case, well, there can't be any government mandates upon women's reproductive rights, but we're all good with government mandates when it comes to the COVID mandates and closing businesses, and in the name of doing what's healthy for people. They believe they're smarter than anybody else. They're for mandates when it comes to education, that the public schools should be the only school. So they want to eliminate choice there. So it's again very, very typical. The hypocritical. It's very disingenuous, but it's standard procedure.
And she did say that she did say that she did not she basically she wasn't supportive of vouchers, and she wasn't supportive of school choice. She mentioned that $75 million is spent on school choice, and the audience, on the Democrats in the audience gasped, "Oh my gosh." They failed to mention that the budget, the last budget pass, was well over $100 billion. Right. So $75 million is an accounting error for the Wisconsin DPI. And she acted as if school choice is just crushing the hopes and dreams of public school children across the state, which is not true. It's absolutely not true. And she also made comments that school choice programs in Wisconsin are not adequately vetted, nor are they monitored. And it's quite the opposite. They are under enormous regulatory burden, whereas Milwaukee public schools have 0% of kids at reading at a proficient level, and no one cares.
Correct. They're very good at ignoring things that don't fit their narrative. So as they ignore the child's life, they ignore the crime wave that's happening out there, willingly, intentionally ignore it like it doesn't exist. So we see that on many issues. That's their modus operandi. They unfortunately get away with it, at least in most of the media, except for good media sites like this one. But that is part of the struggle.
Dan, I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot here. One of our listeners here made this point, and I checked and confirmed it. I believed at one point you endorsed Russell Jones for judge here in Washington County. Me being in Washington County, I've been watching this race pretty closely.
Okay.
Have you taken back that endorsement, and if so, why?
Initially, yes, because initially he presented himself as conservative, going against an Evers appointee, which is all correct. Though I don't believe he was quite upfront with us about some of his history, and so that I dialed that back at that point. I support him, and I'll be voting for him because the current judge in place hasn't answered my question about disavowing Janet Protasewicz. This is a circuit court judge position, and another circuit court judge running for Supreme Court who is a miserable failure and derelict in her duties in protecting the safety of her community. So I cannot support Hetzel for that reason. And we do have other circuit court judges, Brad Schimmel, who's been very upfront in denouncing Janet Protasewicz. So it just was some of those issues that weren't transparent up front that caused some friction.
Okay. Great, thank you. Can you explain to us briefly you being victorious here in the election Tuesday will mean that the state Senate maintains its supermajority. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the Wisconsin Constitution, Article 7, and it's very similar on the federal level, that impeachment proceedings can be brought, and you need 2/3 in the Senate to complete an impeachment. So it's very similar. Starts in the House, in this case, the Assembly, with a simple majority. So that would be the moving body initially to bring forward impeachment proceedings, and then the Senate would act as the trial court, but needs a 2/3 majority to convict or to actually impeach. This seat, I would be that 22nd or 2/3 majority, 22nd Republican senator to have that 2/3 majority. So that is very authority that comes to us only with those numbers in place. So this is an opportunity and authority that is in our Constitution, and this is an opportunity to use it.
So I think it was the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, they're trying to, gin this issue up.
Sure.
And they said that you had commented you would be open to impeaching Janet Protasewicz were she to win the state Supreme Court race. What was that article fair? Is that accurate? Like what do you want to say about that?
Sure. I've been upfront with D.A. Chisholm being initially. I had called for his resignation many months ago, and he's not going to resign. The voters haven't felt enough pain yet, I guess, to bounce him out of office. But when there comes to, I think this impeachment process goes to dereliction of duty, and I called Janet Protasewicz out for dereliction of duty in her current role. Of course, the Journal Sentinel, other media took that to be that I would want to impeach her before she's even seated as a Supreme Court justice. Well, which couldn't happen. So I was referring to her current position as a circuit court judge, that she's been derelict in her duties, and I think that impeachment can be considered in that situation.
What about on this? If she's on the Supreme Court, is that something even feasible, or?
Well, yes, it could be, but again, she doesn't have a record there, or can't impeach somebody in a position that they don't currently serve in. So,
I mean, down the road, if she served in it.
Well, we have to see what she does. So really that point is moot as far as being on the Supreme Court. So I'm referring to her current position as a circuit court judge. If she were to lose the election Tuesday and I win, and we have that 2/3 majority, I think we should look at her record as a circuit court judge and perhaps take those measures.
I guess I'm going to go a little bit out of a soapbox here, and probably most people disagree with me on the right. But I think even impeaching or removing Chisholm is a really, really slippery slope. I think anything that we're willing to do on the right, we need to be aware that the left could do the same to our prosecutors or our justices, right? And so I guess I personally, I don't want Chisholm there. I don't want Janet Protasiewicz there, especially after what we've learned through our own reporting. But I just think it's a slippery slope, and I think impeachment and removal should be used for the most extreme of circumstances. For example, if a district attorney commits a criminal offense, right? Or
of course.
You had that district attorney in the Making a Murderer case where he's accused of texting victims and with, sexual comments, or there was a district attorney where she didn't show up, I think, for like a month. Nobody could find her. Like, literally, I'm not making that up. No one could find her for a month or something. That kind of a circumstance. So I guess I'm just going to say, I'm going to urge conservatives to take just a step back on that kind of thing and make sure the principle is sound, make sure the law is sound, because it could be flipped right back on our people.
Especially when you consider, sorry, Dan, let me just step in. Chisholm historically has been good with not charging police officers. There's been a couple cases I disagreed with, but overall, I thought he's been pretty fair. And we do have to be careful that we don't end up bringing in, like we're seeing out in Manhattan, or another one of these Soros-funded woke DAs that just want to go after cops, relitigate old prior police shootings. So I think Jessica's to point there. We do have to be careful on making that move.
Yeah.
Can you imagine District Attorney Kimberly Motley or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, it's a point well taken. I'm looking at from the dereliction of duty. They have put the safety and security of the public in jeopardy time and time again. And as government, that is a top priority of government, is the safety and security of the citizenry. So that's the part of it that just causes great concern to me, and we haven't seen that area improve. So it's to me a dereliction of duty. It's a criminal would be another matter, but that's the way I'm looking at it. And
well, I suppose the strongest argument against Chisholm on that front would be his non-prosecution rate. And Jim and I we broke that story. Like, when we first reported that, nobody was looking at, really honestly, him or his office, and all the focus of the media, it was on the police, very unfairly, we thought. And so Jim and I just said, we need to scrutinize, like, Chisholm's office, the court system. And I know Jim had issues when he was a cop with the district attorney not prosecuting cases he thought should be prosecuted. And we had discovered that 60% of the cases referred over by law enforcement to Chisholm are not prosecuted. I think that's wildly high. It's grown a lot over the years. And I think that's the strongest argument against him, certainly.
No.
Yeah, but it's something that hasn't been available. It can be a slippery slope, absolutely. But when you have these positions of authority, they're there for a reason, and it's accountability to me that if you have that threat of impeachment, or they know that it's there, there's automatically a level of accountability that has now been introduced into the system, and that is our only level of accountability as legislators.
Well, I think the Democrats are terrified about you winning because, it's, as discussed, it would be a supermajority in the Senate. And we're 2 seats short in the Assembly of accomplishing that, which means that Republicans are in reach, right, of a supermajority in both houses, which, if they were to get that, they could override Tony Evers' vetoes, which would be an extraordinarily powerful
You would.
ability. If
Right.
you were to lose this seat, then even if a supermajority in the assembly is achieved, we're lacking one in the Senate. So I think that's a huge, huge factor right here, where you're seeing all of this liberal money pouring into your district.
Yeah.
Can you
Absolutely.
talk about? Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's just another level of authority, if you want to call it that, is the veto override authority. And the way the elections have been going, I would think that the assembly will have opportunities to gain those 2 seats in under 2 years now. With that election cycle, so very, very important for that reason. I think that introduces some accountability as well upon the governor and the administration to know that they shouldn't be going sideways on their decisions, because they may be held accountable in the very near future for that. So it improves government.
Okay, Dan, before we let you go, we do have a guest host on with us today, Nick. Nick lives in the city of Milwaukee. She's one of our first followers. Nick, did you have any questions for Dan Knodl?
No questions. I'm just agreeing with everything. I did want to circle back to the comments and the experience at the event you were at, and how, the Democrats were behaving. And I was just sitting here thinking about all of this money from the opioid settlements being used for opioid or for fentanyl test strips, vending machines with fentanyl test strips. So there is definitely a double standard when it comes to life. And in the news, there was a baby that was born at 22 weeks gestation that's going home after being in NICU. So definitely at 22 weeks, that baby's life was viable. Doctors saved that baby's life, and that baby is going home. So, I mean, anytime I think you have a heartbeat and organs developing, that is definitely a baby. So how is it that on one end, there's reproductive rights and a woman's right to choose to do whatever, and then on another end, you have an adult that's fully aware of the dangers of drugs, and then you're trying to save their life. So there's definitely that double standard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good points.
Well, thank you for that, Nick. I brought that up. I brought up science. The Democrats want to always be, well, let's science. We got to use science. Science is real. Well, science tells us that there's a heartbeat at 6 weeks. There's can feel pain when you get towards the 20-week age. There's viability. So there's a life there. And to simply dismiss that, not even recognize that life again, is just cold and callous.
You were right. And I was in the audience, I was farther in the back, and they were laughing, they were jeering, rolling their eyes, snickering when you mentioned that the life growing inside of a woman's uterus in her womb, that is a human life. And just that it can taste, it can touch, the heart is beating, it's growing. And with modern science, viability is changing. I mean, they're able to save a child earlier and earlier. And it was Sandra Day O'Connor that said Roe versus Wade was on a collision course with itself because it set up these viability standards. And with modern science, those standards are just kind of obliterated. And so now after the Supreme Court decision last year, now it's up to the state legislature to make some decisions. And I think that there's some tough decisions for the Wisconsin State Assembly and State Senate. But I think to prioritize life is a good thing, and it shouldn't be snickered at, and it shouldn't be something that is a mockery.
Yeah. In this case, science has become inconvenient for them, so they'll just ignore it.
Yes.
Well, I was born to a teenage mother. She was very poor. She made $10,000 a year at one point in my childhood. And so, and I was born before Roe v. Wade. So I resent actually when, people on the left or whatever argue, oh, well, maybe the mother's poor, maybe their teenage mother, in other words, as if children who are poor or born to teenage mothers or born in tough circumstances can't go on to be productive members of society. I find it to be an appalling argument. And so, I'll just say that. And I'll also say that I might deviate from a lot of people in the state, but I'm opposed to abortion in cases of rape as well. I say that because I have a family member, for example, who was born out of a very brutal stranger rape situation and was given up for adoption and came back into the family at like age 30 as an airline pilot, very successful person, one of my favorite family members, ever, a wonderful human being. And when I hear this argument about rape, like I think of that family member and I can't get past the notion that he deserved to live. He was an innocent life.
The
I
baby
get
is-
it's a tougher, yeah, I get it's a tougher issue. But, honestly, that's where I come down. I do understand, though, that, those positions are not in the majority. And I don't want to lose everything else, I guess, by
That's right.
sticking so firmly to them. There's a lot of issues I care about, right? And that we have to care about in the state. So that's my stem winder.
I agree with you, Jessica, wholeheartedly. What I often said when I was in college and when we were debating this, so when I was in law school, we would debate this. I would say to those who are vehemently supportive of abortion, if you encountered a 14-year-old young girl who was in 9th grade, basically a freshman in high school, didn't have a dime to her name, was pregnant, 17-year-old father was a gang member who was repeatedly in and out of jail, and she'd been kicked out of her home once parents found she was pregnant and had nowhere to go. And what would you tell her? Would you advise this young girl to get an abortion? And usually they would say yes. And I would say, well, that was my mom and you just aborted me. That's my story. Because, the other end of the story, my dad joined the Marines, turned his life around. They got married and she had 3 other kids after. And now she has 18 grandchildren. If she had not chosen life, I would not be here and many other souls would not be on this planet. And when you take away one life, it leaves a vast hole in the world. And that's the message that needs to be said more. We need to value life. Abortion is not, it's not birth control. That's something else you said, which was laughed at, but it's true. And it's difficult. And if someone has had to, if that's something they've done, that's not the end. I'm not condemning any woman who's ever had an abortion. What I'm just saying is that life matters and every human life matters.
And those are the stories the legislative process allows for us to hear from the mothers. I mentioned that as well. We need to hear their stories, their situations. We need to hear from medical experts. And that's what the legislative process is built for. And perhaps there is a compromise position at the end of that. But so we need to begin that process. I think that is our responsibility to do that. And as far as the rest of issues in the state of Wisconsin, I mean, we're in a very good place fiscally. And we don't want to slip in that regard. We have budget dollars. We can do continued tax relief, which when we've done in the past has only brought in more revenue. So has put us in a better situation. We can't, the inflation comes from the federal government, but we can address some partially on our tax reform to help combat that, because that is a big issue that certainly families with lesser wherewithal are getting hit hard.
And
I read that you had said that there were 2 major accomplishments that you wanted to cite, and one was tax cuts. I'm glad you brought that up. And the other was the victim protection bill, which I was curious what that entailed.
Yeah, and that was Senator Alberta Darling and I. We have found that the perpetrators were threatening people, even from the jail cell, that if you come to testify or going to be a witness or even the victim and come to testify, some harm is going to find you. And we're threatening these people. And it's hard for a prosecutor to put on a case if it doesn't have the witnesses to show for fear of their bodily harm or their life. So we put penalty enhancers in there for that. And Governor Evers did sign that into law. So the public safety is at the top of the list for me in government. It's the safety and security of our citizenry. And that's why I keep referencing back to these judges that in Milwaukee County have been derelict in their duties. And we have to call it out. And that's the way we can do it from the state level with new laws that they have to enforce those laws or call them out through other measures. If it's an impeachment process or override of governor's veto, we have to take advantage of those opportunities.
Mandatory minimums,
I
one
wanted
way to do it.
mention really fast, Nikki McKenna had sent me this, that Milwaukee Archbishop Jerome Listecki issued a public statement, which I think is extremely important, where he said, I could not and would not support a candidate whose position on life is contrary to the teachings of the church, a position contrary to the teachings and love of Jesus. Vote like you love God. So I hope that that's a message that I'm very proud of Archbishop Listecki for coming out publicly and engaging in these culture issues. I believe Christians in the church need to do that more and need to remind fellow Christians that you need to vote. You know, you can't, prayer is wonderful, but it is imperative that Christians engage in the world and engage in politics. When you look around you and you see what the tragedy of Nashville, you see the devaluing of human life. It is so important that we as Christians vote and we don't stay home. We get others out to vote and we vote like we love God.
It's wonderful. It's all part of the legislative process, and those people, the flock of the Catholic Church, of which I am one, needs to be vocal and stand strong on their values, and that they have to make sure that resonates with their state legislators. So we make prudent decisions on their behalf. So that's good to hear.
All right, we have to be going down. I really appreciate your time. Listen, election is on Tuesday. A lot of undecided voters still out there. Can you make a final pitch to voters? Why should they vote for you over your opponent?
Yeah, well, with me, they'll get somebody who has got things accomplished, can get things accomplished. It certainly gives me an advantage to be in the majorities in both houses to get things to the governor's desk. My opponent simply is not going to have that opportunity if she were to be elected. So track record is there. Proven and even bipartisan efforts. This bill we just talked about was Alberta Darling and I, signed by Democrat Governor Evers. So politics is the art of the possible. I can get things done. I have gotten things done, and in a very fair and level way throughout this Senate district. So I'm a
You had
candidate.
one last.
Good one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that wraps it up. I think I'm a proven commodity that can be trusted, and a pragmatic and prudent legislator.
And I'd like you to speak, and last question here, but I'd like you to speak to those women, who don't like Trump or whatever, but they have conservative values. They're going to come out and vote in this race. I'd like you to speak directly to that type of voter. What should they know about you? What should they keep in mind about you when they go into that ballot box?
I think they have recognized that. That's been shown in that 2020 election, that they're comfortable that I am listening to their issues and appreciate their opinions, and will factor that into my decision making when it comes to voting. And so I'm glad to hear from them, and hope that they're with me come Tuesday, and that I will be representing their views.
All right, great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you joining us.
Okay, on Wisconsin.
All right, good luck Tuesday.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was great. We've Henry Perez, who's running for Racine Mayor, has been waiting patiently. I'm going to bring him on.
Hi, Henry.
Good evening,
hey,
Henry.
How are you?
Hi. Thank you for waiting. I know you're waiting a while there. We just had a great conversation there with Dan Knodl.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Before we get started, I wanted to just briefly introduce Nick. So Nick commented in the first segment. Nick is one of our favorite readers of all time. We've
Thank
known Nick. We've met Nick in person. A phenomenal researcher, phenomenal intellect, and really embedded in the city of Milwaukee, really understands all the issues going on there, a fresh voice out of the city of Milwaukee. Because of Nick's job, Nick can't be on video or give Nick's real name. She can't give her real name. We know it. So I just want to let people know why there's no video there and who Nick is. But we have, for 2 years, honestly, have come to know Nick and know how interesting Nick's insights are and how refreshing in a lot of cases. So we thought we'd bring Nick on to comment on some of the things. So just jump in whenever you want, Nick. We
Okay.
can be hard to get a word in edgewise around, but
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, just jump
out of
in.
the way.
You have to jump right in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will do.
So Henry, tell people what you're running for, and for the people who don't know.
I'm running for mayor of the city of Racine. It's
Awesome.
a great challenge. I've been an alderman for 10 years. I love this city. I moved here from Miami, Florida about 18 years ago, and I immediately fell in love with Racine. Unfortunately, ever since I've been here, and that's why I got involved in running for office 10 years ago, is that I've seen things starting to decline. And I think I'm in a position to make some important moves that will get us back on target.
Can you tell people about the incumbent mayor? I know he's a woke radical who's destroyed the police department and presided over an era of skyrocketing crime. But what can you tell everybody about the incumbent mayor of Racine?
Wow. There's a lot that can be said. I don't know if we can put it on the radio. I find him to be very vindictive. I find him to be very much have a temper in the sense that if you don't agree with him, you're out of the picture completely. For the last 5 years that he's been the mayor, I've challenged him on many issues. And now, as a result, I am the longest serving, continually serving alderman, and I'm relegated to positions in the council that are always last. And when you think of seniority and you think of the way things should happen, the longest serving council member should not be appointed last to every committee. And the way the system works is the first person is the chairman, the second one's assistant, the third one's like the assistants, and the fourth and fifth have no authority or power to do anything. So many of the things that I've put into what we call the queue, waiting to be handled, doesn't even get out of committee. It doesn't even go into committee. I think that that's the direction of the mayor. And because when we have to do stuff, my constituents are not being represented because the stuff that I present doesn't even get to the floor. And so I find that to be unjustifiable. And I think that's because I'm trying to be common sense. I try to give the opposite view of what I think are some really ridiculous things that have come through council. I challenge him. I ask a lot of questions. He doesn't like people questioning him. So as a result, I have been put in a position where I have no other choice than to stand up and say, this is wrong. We need to have everybody listen to. We can't be talking about abortion and LGBTQ rights and conversion therapy. We have to talk about keeping the city safe. We have to talk about roads that can be driven on. We have to talk about how are we going to revitalize our communities? How are we going to keep them safe? The first 2 hours of the new year, we had a gun battle on the street and a couple people were killed. So he started several years ago defunding the police by not authorizing positions going into the police academy. And I have a couple of memos from the former chief of police who was saying, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to fall behind. And I've written in the articles in the paper and I've given speeches on how we're defunding the police. And everybody's been saying, no, we're not. Well, you know what? We are down 39 police officers in this budget year. We're only allowed now to respond to calls where they are in progress and where you could be injured. You could have an accident, no injuries. They just tell you to call it in. They'll give you a case summary, report it to your insurance company. Cops will not respond to anything other than what's written in the curtailment plan, which is a plan that Corey didn't even want released until after the elections because it's that drastic. And right now, he has spent. They just released the money, the financial reports from just a couple of days ago that we turned in. He has spent almost $500,000 in advertising, most of it against me. And that tells me a great thing. Most of his contributors are out of state, Democrat Party. He's getting like $10,000 every 3 days from them. And that is just ridiculous. Mine is a grassroots effort campaign. Almost, I think, 96, the article said 96% of the people who have contributed to me are locals in the city of Racine itself. And I've only raised, I don't know, I think like $12,000 or $16,000 or something. But the point is, the people in this community are not happy with the woke opportunities that don't take care of the real things. A lot of people don't understand that when you have a referendum to hire 11 more officers, which we just had and failed, and I'm glad it failed because there was money to pay for the officers once he received the ARPA funds that he chose not to use. And what happened there was, at the end of the day, on the budget year, he knew, because we're already down 20, that the police academy wouldn't even take 11 more. They take 7 at a cycle. So there would be 31 positions that were not accounted for, and that money in the budget will go into the general fund, of which he has priority over what he wants to use it for. And so he blamed Madison, the Republicans. He blamed the city for not voting in for more money for the cops. But you know what? It's not true. And he knows it, and that's what he does. There was a feature here a while back when the town was closed up because of COVID, and he told me personally that the reason the senior business downtown, which is Dimples, did not receive any money was because she had other resources available to her. And I thought, wow, fantastic. Okay. And then he said to the community, the reason he didn't give her money was because her husband went to the rally in Madison and could have brought back COVID. And I'm like, okay, so either he lied to me or he lied to her. Either way, it makes him a liar. I can understand a misspeak, you get a date wrong or a number wrong. I understand that. But that's a clear out lie.
Wow.
So we continually have challenges like this. And our city council is very much Democratic, or Democrat, not Democratic, Democrats. And so the challenges that come forward that are conservative in nature usually do not even make it into committee. And that's very upsetting to me. I want to represent the people of Racine. I don't care if you have an R or a D by your name or you're an independent. We need to bring light into the darkness that's come upon our community. Just last Friday, there was a shootout between gangs at a business off of Taylor Avenue, 17th Street, well, 23rd, it's 2300 Taylor. So 2300 Street, the wall on the outside of the business had bullet holes in it. The employees' cars were shot up. One of the gang members got shot. And then when I went inside to speak to the people there, it's not my district, but I like to go see what's going on in the community. And they said, Henry, we froze. We didn't know what to do. So I teach concealed carry and violence abatement. I'm a retired Miami police sergeant. I've served security here in Wisconsin and in Florida 40 years. So wow. Security police for 40 years. So I taught them, this is what you got to do. This is how you got to move. This is where you got to go. And they were like, well, why hasn't anybody ever told us that? And why didn't anybody from the mayor's office come see if we were okay? And I said to them, well, it's not a photo opportunity. It's over. And unfortunately, that's all it's become, photo opportunities. In my administration, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually care about the people in our community. We're going to turn this place around. We're going to fully staff our police department, our cop houses. We're going to provide the appropriate training to the police officers, additional training, because they're very well trained. And we're going to work with the city departments and the community partners and implement crime reduction policies. We're going to open up the mayor's office to the people, not just those with connections. I'm not going to be a pay-to-play mayor, which is what's happening now. I've been told by many businessmen, If you don't agree to his pay, you don't get to play. And I'm like, really? That's really going on here? And oh yeah, they're absolutely doing that. I have several businesses that have come to me and said, I'm not asking for any money from the city, but I want to do this in the city. And the mayor said no. And I'm like, really? And you don't even want any money from the city? Yeah. One company wanted to bring their company to the city and hire 1,000 employees. I don't know where they would get them because I don't think we have 1,000 people that want to work in our community right now. But that's not the point. He said no. And I think it's because he couldn't have a stake in what was going on. You know, when the city doesn't give you money, then you can't really tell, the city can't really tell you what to do. And that's all about Corey Mason. We need community revival. And our downtown is the gem. We have one of the best beaches. We have the #1 rated marina between Sheboygan and Grand Haven, Michigan. And that's improving. We're going to work together with the county to make that happen. We're going to invest in our communities. We have a downtown that is amazing. The Downtown Racine Corporation is a private organization that works downtown. They're doing a great job. Kelly Cruz is the director there. And we are not even scheduled to have any profit events like weddings. I think there's a wedding this summer, but no event like festivals coming into downtown. We used to be the festival place for all of Southeast Wisconsin. And now we can't even get people to walk downtown. One of the things is they're afraid. And I've had members of the Hispanic and the African-American community come to me and say, Henry, we trust you, but I don't want to go downtown. I'm afraid I'm going to get shot. I don't know. The city's not as safe as it used to be. Well, of course not. When you're down 39 officers and 69 officers since 2020, what are you going to do? I mean, so we have a big plan in place. I have some ideas and have been talking to people how we're going to regenerate our police department. And we're definitely going to make that a priority because the #1 obligation of any city government in their social contract is to keep their residents and their citizens safe. That is not happening in our community right now, and it's a shame. And so we have a great challenge before us. I think that the broad base of experience that I have, for example, I'm an immigrant. I fled here to the United States from Cuba, fleeing communism with my mom when I was a child, grew up in inner city Miami. I've had to work 2, 3, 4 jobs at a time just to make ends meet for my family. I understand the struggle that the people in our community have, and I am very upset at the way that we frivolously give money away when these people work hard or to earn money and then have to pay a great amount of taxes and then see their money go to issues that are not that critical. A lot of them are feel-good issues and some are important, but it's more important to be safe. It's more important to have our potholes filled. It's more important to have our garbage picked up. And we're lacking in all those departments right now. Part of that has to do with the morale because they don't feel that they have any support from the mayor's office. And the mayor's office has grown exponentially since the mayor has been there, and other departments have dwindled in size. So that's going to change. That's going to change when I'm there. We're going to be an open and transparent government. I plan on publishing everything we're doing that's reasonable to publish, not confidential or anything like that. But people in our community are going to know. They're going to know that City Hall is involved. We're going to do it in Spanish and English. 26% of our community is Hispanic. 24% is African American. We have 1% other. So we got about 48% Anglo. And of course, the people that yell the loudest are the ones that get the attention. So that's going to change. I'm going to have the advocates for every member of the community. I'm going to have the advocates for people that want to bring a business to town that will walk them through every step of the process and prevent the delays. I've had people come to me and say, Henry, it's been 9 months that I've been working with the city to open my business, and I'm still not there. That's incredible. I had a gentleman come to me that says, hey, they want me to build a basin, a water basin in the back of my store. I did it. The water works, but they haven't approved it yet because it hasn't gone to committee. It's been 3 months. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do? That's 3 months of business that I could have been running, earning money, and it's not happening. So we have a lot of things that we have to correct. We have to engage the community. We have to engage the departments to be more efficient. We have to right-size city government. And with that, I think we're going to be going in the right direction. And it's a challenge. It's like a 1,000-piece puzzle. We're all cut the same way. You got to kind of figure out where you're going to start. You got to attack it. You got to solve, and you're able to solve your puzzle. One of the things that I like about the community here is, in my particular case, they know to call me when they have issues. I'll give you an example. This happened just yesterday and the day before. School crossing guard sends me a message over Messenger and says, Henry, I've been complaining to the city since January that the school crossing traffic lights are not working in front of the school. I almost got hit today. I'm scared. Can you do something? Well, I called the department head for Public Works, and I said, hey, this is a school. You got to prioritize this. They've been asking for help since January. Well, she called me back yesterday, just joyous. She says, look, I'm sending you a picture. They're fixing the traffic light today. And I went, good, it finally worked. But that's a type of issue here. You know, the city is not responsive to its citizens. I've had other members of the community said, I've tried to get an appointment with the mayor. He would just, if you're not part of his elite crew, you don't get to see him. And now all of a sudden in the last month or so, he's been everywhere. Today he was campaigning with the governor in the inner city. They were both there shaking hands with people. And I'm thinking, really? You're the governor of the state of Wisconsin to shake hands here in the community so you can get a vote? Very disappointing.
Henry, let me ask you a question from one former cop to another. I read that shootings are up in Racine, I think 71% in the last year. And, wow. You know, you and I understand the importance of proactive policing and of police officers having the support of the city in doing that job. You have proactive policing, you're going to have pursuits. You very well could add, you know, more controversial arrests. And, you know, police officers like knowing that they have the backup of the city. So I have to ask you, do you feel like the police officers right now, what is their morale like? And do they feel that the city has their back?
Their morale is unfortunately very bad. They do not feel like they have the support of the mayor's office. However, I will tell you this. At 2 hours after the police signed their contract, which is backdated for 2 years, they came and endorsed me for mayor. So they understand that I understand them. Police and fire both endorsed me for mayor over the regular mayor, who's now counting on his commercials and on his literature. He's pro-police. He's bringing police back. Well, the police themselves are saying, sorry, buddy, but what you're saying is not true. And he has no problem. What's the right word? I don't say lying, but he has no problem being disingenuous with the community. It happens all the time. So I have learned over the years to not trust him at all. And so when he comes to me, which is very little, because he knows that I'm not friendly to his policies most of the time, he cringes when he has to challenge me. He does it very simply. Oh, Alderman, how are you? Good. Thank you so much. You know, we need to do this. And I'm thinking, right, what are you going to gain from it? And being a pastor for 40 years, I hate that. I hate the appearance of darkness that comes from when he's talking to people. And people are catching on. I had several messages on my Henry Perez for Mayor of Racine Facebook page that have said, Henry, I can't believe the mayor is doing this to you. I'm a Democrat, but I'm voting for you. I hope the other people in my community see through this, because we know what you're like. We appreciate you. We know that if we have an issue with City Hall, we can come to you and you will help us take care of it. And that's our situation right now.
Very good. Nick, do you have any questions? Nick, do you have any questions for Henry?
One question I did have for Alderman Perez is how many, right now, how many sworn officers are on the Racine police force, and how many will be once you get it staffed to where, you know, you have more officers that can be on the streets?
We're manned on the budget for 199. We currently have like 140 that can actually be on the road. And so that creates a big challenge for us. Most of our officers work every single day, 10-hour shifts. And the only way they get a day off is if they call in sick, which puts a higher demand on the other officers as well. It's not a pretty picture. And the problem all along has been that the money has been available, but it's been used for other things.
Like violence prevention, like the Office of Nonviolence Prevention, what it really should be called, because that's kind of something that's similar that's going on in the city of Milwaukee. There's an Office of Violence Prevention, but no real way of measuring the impact that it's having or not having on violence. Would you say that that would be a safe bet for the city of Racine?
Well, right now, I know for a fact that the mayor didn't want to do it to begin with,
Okay.
that he was kind of pushed into it. And now he claims, oh, no, we're doing this, we're doing that. But we don't have an effective way of measuring that right now. We have violence interrupters, which really do a good job when there's a scene that can become hostile or violent. Members of the community go out and advocate for peace, and they do a good job. I'm very impressed by that.
Okay.
And but you know, we as people have many challenges before us, and sometimes we overreact or underreact, and we have to deal with the consequences of our actions. We have to take personal responsibility for our own safety and the safety of the community, and that becomes a challenge because people are under stress because of finances, relationships, drug use, mental health concerns, and all those things are prevalent everywhere. But they seem to be more prevalent in a town of 77,000 people that were counted in the census. We have, I would say, a good maybe 10,000, and I'm just guessing, but about 10,000 people that weren't counted in the census. And a lot of them are Hispanic, because when you have someone from the government that comes to your door and says, I want to know how many people are here, they're not going to tell you because they're afraid of the consequences.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we have a big challenge before us, but I think it can easily be handled with a proper scope, with a proper understanding, and with the proper relationships with people. And that's the challenge we have before us. So I am a community policing certified manager for community policing. And I was talking to some of the officers and talking about some of their ideas and my ideas. And they were like, well, Henry, we've never done that before. So yeah, let's do it. One of the things the officers are disheartened by right now is that curtailment plan, they're not allowed to do police work. They really aren't even supposed to do traffic stops. And unless they see it and they think it's really important. And so when you're told, hey, you're a cop, you can't arrest people, you can't write tickets, you can't do this, you're like, okay, well, what can I do? Well, there's only a handful of things that they're technically allowed to do under this new plan. And it's like 15 things. And then people complain to me, well, Henry, I don't see a cop down my street. Well, it's because he's not allowed to do anything. So he needs to patrol if he can patrol. And it gets very disheartening along the way. I know we have issues in our police department. We have issues in every department. But one of my goals is going to be to go ahead and do some more of that training that says, hey, we work for the city. The city doesn't work for us. And so as long as we keep that in mind, I think we're going to be okay. We're going to be able to move forward. One of the things that I want to do is I want to give all my employees NAMI training, National Alliance on Mental Illness, become crisis intervention partners. Every single employee is going to go through that training. And one of the other things I was thinking, kind of jokingly, but I've gotten a lot of complaints about the lack of customer service. So I'm going to try and hire somebody from Chick-fil-A so that they can teach our people how to treat people, because it's really not happening.
So Henry, or Alderman Perez, you're one of two mayoral races, you're a candidate in one of two mayoral races that we're watching very closely, and that I know a lot of conservatives care about. Obviously your race in Racine, and then there's one in Green Bay as well. In both cases, there's very good conservative candidates. There's awful partisan Democratic woke mayors, incumbent mayors. A lot of observers feel that, you and the conservative candidate in Green Bay, have a fighting chance to unseat these incumbents. And so I just wanted to thank you for putting your hat in the ring and for emphasizing public safety and common sense, local governance. And thank you for your hard work, and good luck on Tuesday.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to tell our listeners, luck is great, but we're going to call for providential support. We're going to let God put it in his hands. We've done what we can already, but you have to get out and vote. And that's for all the races, for Dan Kelly's race, for my race, for the governor, for the mayor of Green Bay. It's nice, we have signs out, we have supporters, but you have to go out and vote. And that's really critical. Bring 10 friends, tell them to bring 10 friends, make those phone calls, get people out there. We have to exercise our right to vote. I became an American citizen when I turned 18. The first day that I turned 18, I stood in a park at 3:00 in the morning to get paperwork. It was a long time ago. We couldn't download the forms. But I stood in a park at 3:00 in the morning to get the information. The very next day, I turned everything in I had, and I got sworn in August of 1979. And I was so proud of that. I was so proud of becoming an American citizen. And one of the first things that I did as soon as I could was exercise my right to vote. And I consider it a privilege. And, I've come from being an inner city kid with no direction to being a police officer, having a master's degree, being a pastor, being first generation anything. My mom didn't have any education when she came from Cuba. So I've lived the American dream. I'm now a politician. I've been a politician for 10 years, and I'm going to be the next mayor of Racine. So I feel very fortunate that I've had support of people who cared, support of the Christian community, and support of the conservative community. And I encourage everyone to continue to pray for us, because it's a spiritual battle. It's not about Corey Mason, even though we see who he is. It's a spiritual battle that's taking over our country, especially with the wokeness of the left side. And we have to really there's a Bible passage, I think it's in Ecclesiastes, that says you need to turn from the left to the right. And I use that a lot when I talk about it. And we have to exercise our right, because otherwise we will not be heard.
As an immigrant to this country, and you were just talking, I thought it was so moving what you said about how important it was to you to be able to vote, to be an American citizen. How do you feel when you hear people on the left trashing America and talking about how terrible America is? It's been the drumbeat on the left for some time. It's escalated in recent years. Like, I am curious, as an immigrant, like how you feel about that.
It upsets me terribly, especially coming from a situation of communism. When I hear people saying, "Oh, the United States is," like, man, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the greatest country. Who could come as a little kid from a communist country into this country, become a citizen, become a politician, have the ability to work and provide for your family? This isn't about getting handouts, man. This is about empowering people to be human, to carry forth what they need to do to feed their families, to have pride in their work. And when I see some of this other stuff, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And a lot of that comes from people on the left, especially, who have been privileged. And in my case, I haven't been privileged. I've had to work hard, but I don't mind working hard. That's one thing my wife always said to my kids. You may not like your dad right now, but he's always working hard for us. And I'm very proud of the fact that my wife recognizes that and my children recognize that as well.
I was curious, how old were you when you came from Cuba?
I was about 1.5, but I heard the stories. I grew up in Miami. In Miami, I grew up in the neighborhood called Little Havana. So everything that happened in Little Havana was happening in Cuba too at the time.
How did your family escape Cuba? Like, what was the story there?
My father was a communist, and my uncle was a communist, his brother. And apparently my mom has told me stories about how they had a little shop, like a little butcher shop. And they would come and take over the place and take their money and start preaching from on top of the shelves. And she was very upset, not only at my dad, but at my uncle. And she said, we got to go before this really becomes something dangerous. And we ended up moving to Miami, where my grandmother lived, actually. And I grew up there.
When was that? What year was that?
Way before you were born, in 1962.
Wow, that's really interesting.
We had a great comment from Robert Kolb. We commented that how he loves the Cuban people and that they understand evil socialism. Yes. I mean, it really does. Like North Korea, Venezuela, those are the people that truly understand how bad socialism and communism is.
Then you hear people on the left, like younger generation. I think it started with Bernie Sanders, where it became suddenly trendy with the younger generation to be a socialist. And I wish they could hear, your story Alderman Perez, because I don't think they know what they're talking about.
No,
Not really.
we have a big Russian population in my area, Mequon, Thiensville, and they are the most conservative they're the most conservative people I meet, because they or their parents came here from the Soviet Union. They know what it's like. The stories that they tell me, they lived it. And what's scary is they can see what's happening right now in the United States is particularly scary for them, because it reminds them so much of the stories that they've heard from their parents or what they experienced when they were young. One of my friends, Ina, talks about it all the time. She talks about what it was like to go to school in the Soviet Union. And frankly, it doesn't sound too different than the experience of kids now in most public schools in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm an 8th grade dual language special education teacher, and I work at the Racine Unified School District. And the teacher, fortunately, that I work with is very good. She doesn't deviate too much from the curriculum. But I've been in other classrooms where I'm looking and saying, is that what you're teaching them? You know, that doesn't even make sense. And I become disheartened at times. But I understand that because of the economy and the less saying, no, everybody has to go to public school, you're taking our money away. Those things are not true. Every kid gets paid, like $7,000 for being in school. And that's every kid. So if the kid is not in that particular school, then they don't get that money. So it's not fair. Well, I understand. Public schools have a big challenge before them. The kids that go to private schools are challenged as well, but most of the time have more support from parents and teachers and so forth. In my particular case, most of the kids that I have are single parent in my special ed class, and they have certain types of disabilities. But I love to see them when they're successful. It brings great joy to me. I had one of my kids go up 18 points on their last MAP score, which is amazing.
That's a big. That's not easy to do.
Yeah, well, that's because they had a good teacher, I think.
So I find your story really inspirational. I find you inspirational and motivational. I'm curious how the media have treated you down in Racine. You have some pretty horrifically biased reporters to deal with on the Racine Journal-Times, I know. I mean, has the true version of you come through the media filter?
No, it hasn't. But there have been some reporters who have been very kind to me. But the Journal-Times is in total transition. It's not even local anymore.
No, it's
they're
not.
printed out of Indiana, so the news is always like 2 or 3 days late when it comes here in the paper. There is Racine County Eye, which is a local reporting online media paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually done a safety series for them called Snapshots on Safety. Over the summer, we had so many issues that I decided to contact their editor, and I'm friends with her because she's written a lot about me as well. And I said, look, I want to write about this. I want to write about jogging safety. I want to write about bus safety. I want to write about gun safety. And she said, sure. And we created a series, and I did about 8 or 10 segments on that. And it even got featured on our local Milwaukee station time on Racine in one of the early morning programs.
Great.
So,
well, independent media, again, the power of independent media. That's Denise Lockwood's site, I think.
Yeah,
right?
you're correct. Yeah. You're correct.
Yeah.
And but from the Journal-Times, like I just got Scott Williams, I think is his name. He printed an article. We talked, and he sounded real nice. We talked, but then when I read the actual article, like, I did say that, but this is like not really the whole brunt of what I meant to say, or what I did say.
Well, he's notorious for that. Sheriff Schmalling is tangled with Scott Williams, I think, quite a bit down there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. I think this was really interesting to learn more about you, and I mean, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having on. Nick, did you have any other questions for?
No other questions or comments. I just wish you the best of luck on April 4th. I think the people of Racine need someone like you to represent them.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. If your audience would like to know more about me, please check out on Facebook, Henry Perez for Mayor of Racine, my campaign website, which is perezforracine.com, and my personal business page, which is henryperezracine.com. And I own a small private security agency, and I specialize in church safety, which is an up and growing field.
Yeah,
Very good.
I think it's going to be something that Christians are going to need to concern. Christians and Christian schools are going to have to. They're going to have security. I really do believe that. So
it's a challenge because many people don't understand the importance of it at this point. But when I'm an Alice instructor, and that's what we teach the kids in school, how to defend themselves in a shooter situation. Yeah. And I've been trained by Strategos International as well, and really learned so much, even from my own work as a police officer and security officer here in Wisconsin. What is amazing to me was I was a police officer in Miami for 18 years, came close to getting shot many times, never got shot. I've been close to shooting many people. Fortunately, have never had to do it. I've been shot at twice now since I lived in Wisconsin. One of the persons next to me was killed. So it's, you don't get shot in Miami, you get shot in Wisconsin. That's crazy.
That's crazy. Wow.
Okay. All right, sir.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And good luck Tuesday.
Keeping us on the right side of things.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Jim, what's your T-shirt say? I've been curious about that all night.
Oh, it's
every now and then you jump off and we get a. That's awesome. Okay.
The people with a flag. Yeah.
What's on your sleeve there?
The American flag. Yeah, it's a Relentless Defender shirt. Yeah,
that's cool.
I would love to think that it's a little disheartening because I would love to think that we're a nation of laws, but I more and more believe we're a nation of political will, and we are going to need to have an abundance of political will now so that we can possibly give the Constitution a fighting chance, because we are very quickly becoming a nation that is no longer governed by constitutional principles.
Well, let's switch to Trump. I think that's a good segue right in.
Yeah, I think we should switch it again for our audience members. If we know a lot of you want to sound off, you have some strong feelings about this.
Matthew Allen just said, that's your Taylor Swift shirt.
Yeah, it's not. He's joking. My Taylor Swift shirt is upstairs, but yeah.
Is it a glass case? Is it a glass case?
Will you wear it next time?
I'll wear it next time if that's what you
next
guys
podcast. Yes, I would like to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure my daughter Jenna would like that too. So yeah.
Did you buy that or Jenna made that for you?
The Taylor Swift shirt? No, she made it. That was handcrafted.
Oh, that was cool. That was pretty cool.
I'll try to pull up a picture of the two of us on here if that's what you guys
want. That was great.
Yeah.
You get dad points.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Major dad points.
Did you have a headache afterward? Was there a lot of screaming? Because I took my daughter to a Justin Bieber concert back in the day, and I was like, oh my gosh! I mean, crying, screaming, fainting.
There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of screaming. Most of it came from my daughter out of the 70,000 girls. And yeah, I should actually show that video. That would be great to pop.
That video's hysterical. I thought she was gonna faint.
Yeah, I could try to figure out how to pull that up, but
like pure and unadulterated, joy. I've never seen anyone so happy in my life, I don't think.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, it was a great time. We had a really good weekend.
It reminds me of the videos where you see when Elvis, and everyone's like they're just like, oh my gosh.
Or the Beatles back in the day.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump. Guys, Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously,
first, let me just quick because I wasn't done speaking. If people want to weigh in, please comment. We'll show the comments and we'll respond if we know the answer to it, or just tell us what you're thinking about the Trump indictment today of what's turning out to be more than 30 charges, all related to, I think, his
Wow.
business dealings.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have questions about it, comments, put them in the thread. We'll try to answer. I mean, first of all, I wanted to say it's unprecedented. So it is the first time in American history that a former president has been criminally charged. Obviously Nixon, there were allegations against him that might have led to criminal charges, but I think there was a recognition back then that charging a former president would be so damaging to
So
this
damaging.
country
It's so
that,
damaging.
that there was, it was just agreed upon back then that, he would resign and that he wouldn't be charged. There was just at least agreement back then that you have to do what's good ultimately for the country. I guess that's, arguably Trump supporters would say out the window.
The good
So it's
news-
unprecedented.
You're seeing, I'm looking right now, Pence calls it an outrage. As we said earlier, Ron DeSantis condemned it. We have the key House Republican leaders, Kevin McCarthy, defending Trump. So far, nothing from Mitch McConnell, who I can't stand anyway. So,
well, Kevin McCarthy was really strong. I thought he
Really
said we're
strong.
going to hold Bragg accountable, and
yeah.
he put out a really strong statement.
And Pence was just interviewed, and he also put out a strong statement and said this was indefensible and that he was defending Trump. So I think that I think that Republicans are going to come out and they're going to strongly defend Trump. They know what this means. It's so much bigger. This is bigger than Trump. And as we all know, their hatred for Trump is really their hatred for us. And it's clear again after what happened in Nashville. What is the Biden administration? They sympathize for the trans activists, not the Christians, not Christian children, not the teachers, not the African American janitor who was slaughtered. No, they have no words for them. Instead, they just line up behind the gender cult. It's so disgusting.
This is going to be interesting to see. We have been, as Republicans, so divided in this, not only the state but the country, and it is very interesting to see how you're going to see all factions of the Republican Party and conservatives, I think, come together and unite on this issue.
Absolutely.
And brings me to my second point. Come Tuesday, how does this affect the Supreme Court race? Do we have any conservatives that were maybe sitting on the sideline, maybe bitter about how the primary went? Do we finally have everyone fired up, motivated?
Yes.
And will that be enough to right now our latest internal polls, we were told, were that Dan's down 2 to 3 points. Dan Kelly, will this be enough to possibly push him over?
I think
so Jim, I thought that was a really good point that you made on your Facebook page about the effect of this on the state Supreme Court race. And it did make me think back to the tail end of the gubernatorial primary in Wisconsin, and how I think it was like, I can't remember, that day or something, or the day before.
It was the day before. Or a couple days before. Actually, it was like a couple days before. And that was it for Rebecca Clay. I mean, people came out and voted that were not planning to vote. And they did. They came out and voted for Tim Michels as he was the endorsed candidate of President Trump. So
yeah, it's when
we're talking about the Mar-a-Lago. Sorry, the Mar-a-Lago raid. Yeah.
I think that this is going to, my opinion, this very likely is going to put Dan Kelly over the edge. I think this is going to motivate Wisconsin voters. Maybe there were some that were a little disgruntled, maybe some that weren't aware of this was happening, and maybe they've tuned in and they're going on social media, or that there were some that maybe were feeling bitter or not happy or motivated, and now they'll be motivated. I think that this is going to be, I've said this before, that was one of my tweets that I put out. If you are angry about this, the way that you can show your resolve is to vote and to bring 10 people with you. And if you voted already, find somebody who hasn't voted, drive them to the polls, encourage them to go. That's the way that we show that we are united and resolved.
Well, they do say that, like you said, anger is a powerful motivator to vote. And I think you've seen that in the past where the left were the angry ones, right? They were angry at Scott Walker. They were angry at Donald Trump. And they came out to vote as a result
This is a righteous anger.
change things.
This is a righteous anger. We don't need to, there's not going to be some January 6th moment. As much as the left-wing media are salivating and wishing for that to be true, we are smarter, we are savvier, and we are going to channel this into to something productive. And
we'll see.
To unify it.
We'll see.
I'm going to be positive about that.
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And then there's the public safety angle too, because there's also that referendum regarding the cash bail, and there's been things circulating telling the liberal side is saying vote no. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm voting yes, because I've had it with the crime, and I think that's what's going to also, in addition to this Trump indictment situation, that cash bail referendum question. When you look at Milwaukee County in the last election, voting was down 46% compared to the previous voting cycle. And I think if people continue not to show up in Milwaukee County, I think that, people being angry about this indictment, and I'll be the first to say I'm not a Trump fan, but I am not happy. I mean, I'm not jumping up and down. I think it is a sad moment for our country that, you indict a former president. I mean, he has done and said things I don't agree with, but
Me too.
I'm not happy. I'm not jumping for joy. I think it's, it makes this country, how does this country look to other countries with this going on? I think I'm very concerned about the impartiality of the DA's office, the Manhattan DA, being backed by George Soros in his election. It really, makes me call to question, and everyone knew he had this affair. There was payout of money. Why now? So I'm not happy. I'm not jumping up for joy. I'm not, I just think it's a very sad moment. And, I think it definitely will get people fired up. And I think, if Milwaukee County voting stays down, I think it may be a good chance for Justice Kelly, and again, this referendum question, that's, people are very concerned about public safety. So I think with that fire and the fire about this indictment, I think it definitely could, as one reader says, swing the needle in his favor.
I do think you're all right that it helps Kelly. I mean, I think it's a nightmare for Janet Prosewicz that this happened right now.
It is.
Literally days before the election. So, I mean, will it be decisive? Well, it's going to come down to turnout. Like Jim said, I mean, we've been hearing 2 to 3 point race, right? So when it's that close, that's in the margin of error, to be honest. So it tells you, and there's always these hidden Trump voters in polls, right? We saw this phenomenon in 2016, where the polls said, Trump was going to lose Wisconsin by 6 points, and then he won it by about 10,000 votes. So there's always this sort of hidden Trump factor vote that is not particularly clear in polls. And so when you're getting to a 2 to 3 point race, it's about turnout, in my opinion. And this is definitely going to help Dan Kelly with turnout. I think it's obvious.
I talked to someone off the record who said that they've seen internal polling that's more favorable than that. And this is someone who is very pragmatic, and they actually feel kind of confident that Dan Kelly can win this. And so I was but I think we need to, this is a fight in the trenches. It can go either way. We are so close. Every vote counts. And, I feel very excited and I really do feel that we've got a good chance to win this. I really do. We just have to turn out. I'll say in Ozaukee County, for example, because I am part of the Ozaukee County Republican Party, we have 70% of our absentee ballots turned in already. And we have 4,000 in-person absentee votes cast. And there has been a huge push on our end, a huge, never before seen push. We have volunteers in our office all day long. And what's really sweet, I bring in coffee and donuts. We have some of the elderly that if they can't, back in the day they were warriors, and now, they've got to take it a little easy. They're writing postcards. We've written over, it must be 3,000 or 4,000 postcards. And so it's really sweet. It's a really, people are very happy and excited and we've got lots of volunteers. We need more. If you're in Ozaukee County, we're doing a Super Saturday. But I think I'm really happy to see conservatives and Republicans coming together.
Something I would like to know, he's supposed to turn himself in early next week. He's going to be booked. Do you think that they handcuff Donald Trump?
That visual.
Can you imagine the imagery of that? Can you imagine the photos of Donald Trump in handcuffs?
So I actually did a story about that, and the conventional wisdom, and this was coming from law enforcement sources in New York, was that they'll defer to the Secret Service on a lot of this stuff. Now, normally there'd be a perp walk, there'd be handcuffing, there'd be mugshots. That's normally how it's handled in New York. You see this concept of the perp walk where they walk the accused, out in public, and then and then the media, take all the pictures. But in this case, you've got the Secret Service. So they allow that because if you're perp walking someone, that's a safety risk. That's a security risk. You're opening them up, right? So I don't know. It's an open question because I do think the Manhattan DA's office arguably would want to do it that way, right?
Don't you think Trump maybe wants it? Don't you think Trump wants that? That imagery will, I almost think,
no.
I think he might want that. That imagery is going to enrage, it's going to enrage the right, it's going to enrage Republicans. And I think this is something that even independents and moderates don't want to see. I honestly think this is not a popular thing. I think they
want to see it.
She raises a good point. Does it turn him even into more of a martyr by having a booking photo and by having him in handcuffs and doing a perp walk?
Frankly, all of this.
Trump's a showman. This gives this to me is. I almost think he might want this. I think it could benefit him for them to overplay their hand like they always do with Trump. They overplay their hand and it really never works out for them.
Well, I thought Trump was, well, actually Jim and I had this conversation a while ago, and people were souring on Trump. People that we know who were hardcore Trump supporters were souring on Trump.
I was souring on Trump.
Yeah, you were one of them.
I'm souring. I was souring on Trump.
Jim was souring on Trump. And I said, he's the cat of 9 lives, and a month is a lifetime in politics. And he always seems to pull the rabbit out of the hat right when he's down for the count. And I was like, we'll see how it plays out. It seemed like support for him was fading. So what do the Democrats do? They pull the rabbit out of the hat and hand it to him, I guess. Yeah. I agree with you, Scarlett. He's probably loving this on some level because it does. The Democrats are risking turning him into a martyr. Yes. You're right about the imagery if they go that far. And I think there are some people that had soured on Trump, but now they'll vote for him just because they're angry about this, just to send a message about this. So it's revived him, ironically. Of course, if he were to be convicted, then he would be precluded and prohibited from holding public office, which is probably what the real end game is.
Right.
So let's test your theory for a second. Nick, you said you weren't a Trump fan. If Trump got indicted, would that make you more likely to vote for him?
Well, he is indicted. That's he
Well, yeah,
wasn't just
Yeah, it
indicted.
is indicted.
Like, let's say, for example, he indictment doesn't necessarily mean he'll
Yeah.
be convicted.
Convicted. Correct.
So let's say he's obviously indicted. Let's say that, he goes to trial and he's innocent, and then all this other stuff started coming out. And the way I feel about how left things are going, left crazy, perhaps I would. Because I voted for Tim Michaels out of protest. So most likely I would, just out of protest, because all these things going on in the country falling apart, inflation, and then having to pay $8 for some eggs, and you want to, be vindictive and prove a point with someone who most likely wouldn't even win a 2024 election before this, to make a point. I probably would, because I'm mad about other stuff.
Nick, what you said 1,000 times, yes. While we are so worried about the world is it's falling down around us. There's issues with inflation. There's issues with the cost of food. My grocery bills have doubled. You're worried about your kids. And Democrats, they have two things that they want to do: trans your kid and go after Trump. That seems to be the only thing they're interested in doing: getting drag queens in front of your kids so they can trans them and confuse them about their gender, and crucify Trump. While China and Russia and Saudi Arabia are all having secret meetings, there's potential disasters with military, there's Ukraine, there's and then we have Joe Biden talking about chocolate chip ice cream.
Then there's the banks falling apart. We got the feds raising interest rates again.
Yes.
So, there, people losing their retirements, like that Silicon Valley Bank that folded. I believe the state of Ohio, their retirees had a big interest in that bank and lost money. So, to me, it make sense, because it's gone again, like I said, way to the left, and it will be back to center,
Yeah, in Ohio, a train derails, and there's probably all the people are gonna have, and their children are gonna have cancer in 10 years, and no one cares. Trump went there, he went there. I think, Nick, what you've said just to me, I think that you represent your common sense person that's looking around, and maybe Trump bothered you. You were sick of it. I know you're sick of the Truth Social tweets. You're sick of all the drama. I love Ron DeSantis. This happens, and I'm upset. I'm angry. I'm again angry at the media, and I'm angry at Democrats, and I'm angry that they don't care about the average person. They don't care about America. They put America last. They put all of us last. And what the things that they prioritize, nobody cares about. On every polling, no one cares about the things they prioritize. Make it make sense. Perfect. That was perfect to say, Nick.
Thank you.
All right. Wow. Longest pause we've ever had here. Do we want to keep on the Trump issue here? We don't have too many more
I have
comments
more.
tonight. Okay.
I had more to say about it.
Okay.
I just wanted to give people some analysis of a few points that I think are going to come up a lot and are important. One would be the background of Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney. We're going to hear a lot of discussion about that. He is a Democrat. And I did a story fact checking. Is it true that he was funded by George Soros? Because Donald Trump had brought that up in one of his Truth Social posts after, it was leaked that he was probably going to be indicted. It is true. There was a $1 million donation that was funneled to through a group that supported Alvin Bragg. There was a strange twist in that, whereby there was a Daily Mail article that reported that $500,000 of the dollars was held back by the group because of a strange text message from a woman who made allegations relating to DA Bragg. Nobody ever revealed what those were about. The Daily Mail said they couldn't even find the woman to confirm it, but they reported that because of this strange, situation, this group only ended up giving $500,000 to Bragg, not the full $1 million. You had Bill Bratton come out. He was the former police commissioner of New York, and he came out and strongly criticized the Soros funding of not only Alvin Bragg, but quote unquote, they call them reform DAs all over the country, right? You have left-wing district attorneys who've been elected all over the country. There's one in Philadelphia, there's one in St. Louis, there's one in Los Angeles, like all over the country. There's one in Cook County, Illinois, and they push alternatives to incarceration. And so I think you're going to see this angle brought up a lot, like just sort of the political background, the funding, the election of Alvin Bragg. You will probably see a lot of talk about this angle of reform, sort of quote unquote reform district attorneys, and this notion that Alvin Bragg has been refusing in a lot of cases to criminally charge people, and yet he is charging Donald Trump. The other points I wanted to bring up, a few other critical points. One is that the Department of Justice, the federal Department of Justice, passed on charging these allegations. So there was a review, there was a lengthy investigation before the federal Department of Justice on this exact same matter. And a couple of years ago, they refused to charge it. There's going to be a lot of questions about then how does Alvin Bragg turn, a federal campaign finance violation into a state crime, because he cannot charge a federal campaign finance violation. This is a state jurisdiction, and that's very unusual. For example, John Edwards, the former Democratic presidential candidate, he was charged with very similar violations related to this woman that he had a child with, a secret affair. She was paid money, and the allegation was very similar, that it should have been listed as campaign finance. Well, he was charged federally because, again, it's a federal campaign finance law. And I think you're going to see some talk about how similar the Edwards case is to what's going on in Manhattan. I would remind people that John Edwards was found not guilty of some charges. There were mistrials in the rest, and he was not recharged. So John Edwards, somewhat close analogy, charged federally, never convicted. The other point I wanted to make, two other points. One is that I've seen analysis where legal experts say that to prove the charges, of course, we haven't seen them, so we don't know 100% what they're charging, but what people are speculating the charges will be with this campaign finance angle, that really it should have been a campaign finance donation, but he listed it allegedly fraudulently as a business and legal expense, is what most people think this will be. But apparently under the law, to prove that, you have to show he was doing this only to help his campaign in 2016, so people wouldn't find out about Stormy Daniels, as opposed to some other rationale. For example, perhaps she was being paid off so Melania wouldn't find out about it. That's actually a defense to this charge. If he can show that there was actually some other reason that he was giving her money, it wasn't for the campaign, then legal analysts say they could lose the case, the prosecution. And the final analysis I wanted to offer people here is I think you're going to see a lot of discussion about the statute of limitations. It is passed for misdemeanors, and a lot of people think that the circumstances would fit at best misdemeanors. They can't charge misdemeanors because the statute of limitations has run out. To make it a felony charge, I was reading analysis where legal experts said, actually in New York, we're past the statute of limitations for felonies as well. So remember, this goes back to 2016. That's a long time ago. Well, the argument is you can stop the statute of limitations, essentially toll them is the legal term, if the person is out of state for a significant period of time. Well, I was talking to a prosecutor who said, well, yeah, that's normally done if someone is out of the state because they're a fugitive from justice, right? They're trying to flee the state so they can't be charged. That's when you toll the statute of limitations and allow a charge to happen after the normal statute of limitations has expired. Of course, Donald Trump was out of the state for a significant period of time because he was president of the United States, right? So he had to live in the White House. As a result, I think some people are arguing. So this is sort of a twisting of the normal rationale or the legislative intent behind like allowing prosecutors to extend the statute of limitations and essentially toll them. So I think, I know that was long-winded, but I think those are some really important legal analysis points. Like, so we can argue the emotional side and what this will do to Trump's presidential chances and all of that. But like, there's also going to be a legal battle, right? There's going to be a legal battle. And I've seen some people say, hey, if you're going to charge a president of the United States, a former president of the United States, something unprecedented in US history, like you better have the strongest case, the most serious case, like of all time. And yet there are all of these questions that I just raised that, people are already saying. And I think you're going to hear these points over and over again in the next few weeks and months and year probably.
How long? This is a very long process. I mean, the primaries are going to start really heating up in the fall, and I mean, Trump was he's already been in Iowa and he's already done speeches, but we all know that this is going to really start to pick up in the fall. We've got the Iowa caucuses, just their early 2024. So this is just going to be such an interesting,
You know what, when you were talking, Scarlett, I just thought of something like what happens because you're right, these things go on and on and on, they drag on, they take forever. His lawyers can file endless motions to stall it more. So what happens if Donald Trump wins the presidency as an indicted person? And then what?
Maybe that's
do we try a sitting president? Do we have a jury trial of a person in the White House?
That like, maybe what the plan for them, that if he wins, this is what, this is going to be odd. I also wonder, is Ron DeSantis going to enter the race now? Is he going, he's a shrewd, I really love Ron DeSantis. It was my primary choice, but I wonder now if he'll even enter the race. I wonder if he'll, with everything going on. I know, Jim and I remember you and I were talking yesterday about our brilliant thoughts of a Trump DeSantis ticket. Like, imagine how powerful that would be if, a 12-year dynasty, but, would DeSantis want to align himself with Trump with all of this? It makes a lot of things very cloudy.
Yeah. It does. Will their egos allow for that to happen would be the big question.
Yeah.
Would DeSantis be willing to be Trump's vice president for 4 years and then Trump endorse and support DeSantis? I don't know. But let me just raise a caveat, Jessica, to your point. Those issues regarding the charges, that was before we found out tonight that I think it's 34 counts related to business fraud have now been issued. And so I wonder how that changes the calculus to some of those original points about the statute of limitations and the crimes. Because that was originally, we just thought it was one thing related, right, to the
Stormy Daniels and the other. So are those 34 counts? Do those go beyond the situation of Stormy?
We don't know because the indictment is sealed. But to your point, the statute of limitations for felonies is passed. It is passed. Yeah. They can only get there whether it's 34 felonies or 2. Yeah. It's passed. They can only get there. They can only get there if the statute of limitations were told because he was out of state for a significant period of time.
I have, just so you guys know, we have Orlando Owens waiting. Should we bring him on and see what his
Yeah, bring
thoughts
him
are?
on. I'm curious what he thinks about this.
I wanted to make one other point that it took a lot of convincing. The grand jury was very divided. And I think they had to be really persuaded on this. They thought the case was so weak that it took a lot of arm twisting to get these indictments. There was a lot.
Well, there's a famous line, a famous quote that a prosecutor could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich is the famous line. That is the prosecutor's show, right? And there was, of course, great division. There was great division. Hi, Orlando, in the Manhattan DA's office over this. The former DA, Vance, he had opted not to charge Trump over this same matter. And then, if I don't know if you remember, but there was this great division, and several prosecutors then quit that were involved in the probe because they were angry he wasn't being charged. And then one of them went out and wrote a book. And then Bragg decided to charge. So there's this long history of other prosecutors, both state and federal, opting not to charge.
Do you think it's possible, because remember, there's also a lawsuit, a civil suit that the Attorney General of New York also filed against Trump. I actually printed it, but haven't really read through it. And she said that there was fraud, but she was looking at it from a civil law angle. Do you think it's possible that maybe there was something they could have uncovered there, and they're trying to bring it, and they're bringing it into Manhattan? I don't know, but I mean, the way it's been framed to the media is surrounding the payouts to Stormy Daniels in 2016, which sounds flimsy. And then as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, well, there's also the federal investigation that's going on. So, one has to think, is it possible that they're just trying to get them on anything they can, just because maybe the federal government can't get them on anything, and they brought in a special prosecutor on that angle? It just seems all suspect to me. Like I said, I'm not a fan of Trump, but I'm not a fan of what's going on either. And, there's no saying is when you try to dig a ditch, this is for my mother, she's from the South. When you try to dig a ditch for somebody, you better dig one for yourself. That's what she's always been said. So, this could be that situation, trying to dig a ditch for him, and it ends up blowing up in their faces, because it doesn't feel right to me. I mean,
I've heard people on the left say that of all the open cases against Trump right now, there's one in Georgia too.
Yes.
That this is the weakest.
Yes.
And so they're upset that Bragg is going first here because they think this is the weakest set of charges.
I've heard the Georgia one, and from what I've read, I just read on that last week, that actually had the stronger case. It still was not very strong, but it was a stronger case than this in New York. And this one in New York, this has been since 2016. They've been trying, and it's extremely weak, and everyone has passed on it. This guy, this Briggs, becoming the governor of New York, he wants to be the one that indicted Trump. It doesn't matter how it turns out for the left, that he did it. He wants Trump in handcuffs, and he wants to be able to be the one that did it. And he doesn't care the consequences, because the left doesn't care what this does to this country. Their vendetta against Trump is just tearing this country apart, and they don't care.
Orlando, what do you think?
My friend, Orlando, you got to realize you got to just push your way in to the conversation here, because you just can't get a word in edgewise. Trust me, I have very free, opinionated women here with me. So
let me just say this: thanks you all for the invitation. Great commentary. Sorry I'm so late. We had a congressional meeting tonight, but I don't know who Nick is, but. This is she sounds very articulate on the issues.
She's wonderful.
I think
we love Nick.
You all make great points. I don't really know what to add to it other than what you guys have said already. I think this indictment definitely. I think it makes Trump stronger. That it makes him you put him back in the forefront again. If there's other cases that I didn't know anything about, the Georgia case. But if there are other cases that are going to fall to the wayside, you only embolden him and his supporters. And I was a Trump guy. I'll be honest with you. I got there. I kind of went through the process of many people. I'm a homer, so I went with Scott Walker first, then I went to Cruz, and ultimately I got to Trump. And once he became the guy, I was like, I'm trumped out. I'm rolling with him. And now that I like DeSantis, the possibility of a DeSantis Trump ticket is very, very intriguing. But I don't know. I don't know if that's. I think if I'm DeSantis, if that came up, if he really has to, I think if DeSantis wants to make the move, and I know that, politics, believe me, you someone who just ran for state treasurer and ran for state rep before myself, that is about windows, right? I don't know if DeSantis if window was actually closed. There's so many things he can still continue to do in Florida and still garner the support and the platform. Whoever may ultimately be the Republican nominee and also hopefully the Republican president, I think DeSantis is still on the rise. So I'm not necessarily this window's going to close. If it's, Florida will always be like, gotta bring Florida home.
I think if I were him, I might sit it out and wait 4 years. I mean, this is just going to get in his way. I think Scarlett was right in the opening. On the right, this is going to turn Trump into Teflon. And just when he was starting to lose support, again, it's going to fuel his supporters and even some people that had soured on him. And if I were DeSantis, I might be like, I'm going to get out of the way of this, maybe let it unfold, say my piece about the prosecutor in Manhattan, and then just sort of step back and watch it unfold a bit.
I think you definitely, if you're using your political hat, I think DeSantis has to read the tea leaves. So you know what? This guy's building momentum. This just catapulted a lot of people that DeSantis will need to, even come out for him. Yeah. But this has galvanized them to get behind their guy. Like, he's going to rail against the establishment, overreaching law enforcement, corrupt systems. And that's going to get, as I call them, the boys in the back of the woods. They coming out for that. Oh, yes, they coming out. They hate the man. No matter what color of man you want to call it, they hate the man. And this is going to bring them out with full force. The question is, it still was a year and a half. That's the question. How long? Now, Trump has to be able to, basically, maneuver this into a bigger platform. But if he has other charges coming up and they fall to the wayside too, it just reheats that soup again and it gets hot again. And if he continues to do that, but I think if I'm DeSantis, I'm reading this thing like, man, this guy, he's kind of picking up momentum. And like you said, Jessica, and also Scarlett, DeSantis doesn't have to do it now. He can still be a rock star in Florida. He don't have to do it now.
Yeah, he's term
right.
limited.
He's young.
He's young. He is term limited, so he has 4 more years. But he just started his term, and so he can finish out his full term and basically start running for president for 2028 like immediately. I'm a huge DeSantis fan. I've been following him so closely for 4 years. A lot of my friends, Moms for Liberty, who live in Florida, what he's done to the woke, I mean, he brings it. He brings it every single day. I think he's smart, articulate. I can't say enough great things. I don't want him to waste his political capital on something that he just, I'm just the way that it's going, that I don't know if he can this is just such a situation that's so favorable for Trump, and it's going to, I don't know, it's murkier now, where I thought there was a really clear path for Ron DeSantis. And not that I would, at the end, I was perfectly prepared to vote for Trump. There's a ton of things I like about Trump. There were some things I had soured on him, but this really just sort of changes my perspective. And I'm a political scientist. And as I look at this, if I were advising Ron DeSantis, I would definitely pause and think this just may not be the hill you're willing to die on.
So I have a question for Jim. Jim, would this make you vote for Trump again just because of this? Because you're done with him. You were. Uh-oh. Can't hear you.
And obviously, if Trump makes it through the primary, I would vote for him regardless. If it was between DeSantis and Trump, I don't know. I think right now I'm aiming towards DeSantis, but yeah, I mean, this makes me put all my support towards Trump, especially if he makes it to the primary, because of what's
So
happening here.
it makes you more likely to vote for him.
Yes, definitely. This angers me. This angers me that this is happening in this country.
It angers me a lot. Everything that you said, Jessica, all of the points that you carefully laid out, that it's so frustrating. Where is the rule of law? What have we come to this country? How have all of our institutions been weaponized by the left? It's sad. I'm angry. It's unfair. I'm tired of it. I feel demoralized, but we have to do something. If they're allowed to go after Trump, who can't they go after? Who can't they take down? What political, if they don't like my politics, I'm next. I've already gotten sued twice, completely frivolous lawsuits. Completely frivolous. They weaponize the legal system. They weaponize everything. I mean, if they can take down Trump, they can take down any of us.
Yeah. How about conservative media? I mean, it's something I worry about. Are we next? Are they going to come after us?
Yeah, we're dangerous. What did AOC do today? The woman who lives of TikTok sued her because AOC lied about her in a committee hearing, and not sued her. She filed an ethics complaint. And when AOC found out who she was, she just looks at her and says, I will not share any space with you because you are, an evil person. You're a transphobe. Like, that's how they operate. I won't share space with you. I can't even breathe the air that you breathe.
Can I add that I think these times are creating a new conservative, I guess, for lack of better terms, a new conservative warrior that people are looking towards, because again, you have the Kelly race, you have the Trump, you have a lot of things going on right now that average Americans who may not be, totally political, don't like the feeling of this, kind of this overreaching government. And people, I think this is a turning point. And I think this, unfortunately, it's a bad place for us to be as America. But I believe the left has overplayed their hand again. They overreach. They always do. They always go too far. They always do too much. And now you've awakened again that sleeping giant of freedom fighters, independents, the boys in the back of the woods, the moderates. You just woke up a lot of the libertarians. Libertarians going to be like, "Yay, I don't vote for Republicans much, but hey, I can't do." They always overreach. They always do.
Yeah, this is too far, and I don't like how it feels. I don't like how the experience of it. I'm not. This is not good. So
I had to plug in my computer. It was about to die. So we have talked for so long.
Me too. I was just doing that. My computer was about to die. I just had to plug in my computer.
But no, this is a really important conversation. And I mean, let's just think about this again, like how unprecedented this is. I mean, he's an active presidential candidate. So we have a situation where a prosecutor has charged crimes that his predecessor district attorney passed on charging, that the federal Department of Justice passed on charging against a sitting presidential candidate. So some on the right are arguing, I saw some tweets, where they're arguing this is interference in a federal election, in a presidential election. And again, you have the specter of what if he wins? And I'm sure his lawyers can delay this. You have the precedent where presidents have immunity, right? They enjoy immunity from civil prosecution and I think criminal prosecution. The founding fathers created that. They didn't want, rogue prosecutors to be able to tie up sitting presidents and distract them with lawsuits and civil prosecutions and things like that. So, So what happens if he wins? I mean, I would say that again. What happens if they convict him and they put him in jail? What does the Secret Service do then? Do they accompany him to jail? Like, what does that look like? I mean, these are questions that we have never wrestled with before in American history. This has never happened before. And so obviously there's serious questions that deserve full scrutiny, not people sort of gloating, right? Or taking cheap applause on Twitter. I think they're really serious questions that every American, including Democrats and independents and people, whatever else, need to wrestle with.
You're exactly right. Because I don't know, maybe if he was convicted, house arrest. I don't know. This is such uncharted territory.
It's so uncharted.
It doesn't seem thought out, because when you look at the federal investigation, Merrick Garland was very cautious. I mean, he still hasn't issued any charges. I mean,
right. It's Merrick Garland. Good point.
He hasn't. It's like he's very cautious of the optics and very cautious of the legalities. And, it just seems to me you have a state, and as a state prosecutor, Manhattan, and then you're saying, the statute of limitations, and here they just rushing, to, hey, we got you. And, there's no thought about the what ifs. I can imagine when he turns himself in, how chaotic that may be. And I'm sure there are some people who are very angry about it. I hope not angry enough to resort to any type of violence, but show again, the point has been made here, your activism by going to the polls and voting. But this is a scary time. It's uncharted territory. And again, I think it's a rush to judgment. And also to point out too, that last week, I believe the grand jury, they paused even, evaluating this case for an indictment, which was very interesting, because people couldn't understand. 1 minute they're talking about it, and then Trump was posting or tweeting that he was going to, or on Truth Social, that he was going to be indicted, and then all of a sudden they paused the investigation for the indictment or whatever, and now all of a sudden, boom, in the news, he's indicted.
There isn't equal treatment before the law. That's just a fundamental premise of our constitutional republic. I'm not going to say, democracy like the left. We have a constitutional republic, equal treatment before the law, rule of law. All of these are they are so fundamental to the operation of our existing order that when you tear these down, you're tearing down the very fabric of our constitutional republic. And I don't know how we recover if they're successful. This is just so, I think where people are very excited, they're almost, when you really understand what's at place, and that anger is absolutely morally justified. And we have to channel that into action that is going to make real substantive change, not just outrage on social media, not protesting in the sense of protesting the streets. We have to think this election is a great opportunity for us. And after that, we have to consider, what can we do that's productive? And there are many things. And I think all of us will be working to figure out what we do next. It's going to be an interesting primary season. There's a lot that we don't know. I'm just very disappointed. It's a very sad day for our republic.
Well, what happened? How does he get a fair jury? Let's talk about that for a second.
Oh my goodness.
How does Donald Trump get a fair jury? Especially in New York, but even putting that aside, how does he get a fair jury?
All of these things are the legal pitfalls of this DA and how the system, this is the breakdown of the system. Let me just add this, and I'll be quiet. I'll just say this: Dan Kelly couldn't have paid for this at all. He couldn't have paid for this 4 days for election at
You're
all.
right.
This, I
Oh
mean,
yeah, this helps him. You think, right?
Them.
tremendously. I mean, the more people talk about it, the more this gets out into the counties, into the state, rest of the state, that they indicted Trump. It's just gonna be like, yeah, I'm going to vote. Yeah, I was gonna go, or I was thinking about it, but yeah, because the man is doing too much. The man is just, it's just you. I think, with Soros and what's the Attorney General coming in, Holder coming in for this last push for Janet, it just put that whole thing in a tank. Just did.
Oh, there's fire in my belly. Like I'm like, I thought I was excited before. There's definitely, I'm going to be working really hard over these next few days, doing everything that I can to make sure that everyone is getting out the vote in my county and beyond. And I think a lot of people, that's where you need to challenge your energy, challenge it into winning on Tuesday. What better message do we send if we get Dan Kelly wins, Dan Knodl wins, we have school board wins, we win the mayoral race in Racine. What better message than we sweep the state with conservative candidates?
It's a victory, or it's a challenge of the Constitution. This is right up Dan Kelly's alley.
Yep.
The overreach and the misapplication of law and the overreach of government, that the federal government the Constitution was a document that actually limited what government could do. Yes. And so this is just going to play right into that wheelhouse of him being a constitutional scholar, and how Janet has already said, well, I want this to happen and I want that because it's my values, and I believe that Black babies should be separated. Yeah, I said it, and so I think that this plays a role into the whole overreaching government, non-constitutional actions of law enforcement or the justice system. This plays right into it.
Yep. Someone just said the hillbillies are fired up.
Yeah.
Well, Trump brought a lot of people out of the woodwork who never traditionally voted. I remember my students went out to Western Wisconsin to talk to some people who lived in counties that flipped by the highest percentage in the country from Obama to Trump back in 2016. And I remember one man in particular, he was a logger, and he, spent his days out in the woods chopping wood down, or trees down. And I guess you chop trees down, not wood. But anyway, he said he voted for Trump, and the only other person he had ever voted for in his entire life was the local sheriff, because it was his neighbor, and he actually knew him and he lived next door to him. And he just said nobody else motivated him. And we said, why? Why didn't you vote for Scott Walker, vote for any of these other candidates? He said, well, I don't have time. He's too busy out, doing his job out in the woods. I always thought that was really interesting. We met a lot of people like that. Like Trump in 2016 brought a lot of very disenfranchised rural people out of the woodwork to vote for the very first time. And I could imagine a situation where some of those people weren't going to vote this time, right? Now there's fatigue set in, and Trump fatigue and all this and that. And I think you're right. Now, do some of those people come out and vote for Dan Kelly and protest to what we just saw happen in Manhattan?
Maybe there's some people that think, oh, my vote doesn't count, and they've been angry. Well, maybe they're now like, what the hell? I'm going to go out and vote, because just do it. Get out to vote, because I honestly think it's the worst. Anyone who tells you your vote doesn't count and they call themselves a conservative and they tell you your vote doesn't count, don't vote. Don't listen to them. They're not on your side. Okay. I almost think that they're plants. People like that, when they tell you don't vote, your vote doesn't count. Do not listen to anyone who tells you that. Let me
say this also, that there's no mailer, no commercial that Dan Kelly could have paid for that's going to hit more Wisconsinites over the next 3 days because the left liberal media are going to play this all Sunday. They're going to play it all day tomorrow, all day Monday, on every station, on every newspaper. Trump's going to be on the front page.
Yep.
I mean, Dan Kelly couldn't have paid for that.
Yeah.
Pull up CNN right now.
For Janet too. That means, since the way this plays out, that's less time for her,
Perfect. Pull up CNN right now. Pull up the market. It's all Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Both Nick and Orlando, you're both right.
It makes me wonder if they had any control over the timing of this. Like, you would think the smart move would have been for them to wait until Wednesday to announce this indictment.
Well, they don't care about Wisconsin. They're not clued in. Like, who are the DNC?
Aren't there other primaries around the country?
Oh, that's a good point. I guess I don't know. Are there?
There's not many have elections like us. There are some, but not many. I know with Moms for Liberty, most of the school board elections are in November. We're one of the few states that has these spring elections.
Okay.
Somewhere the DNC is pretty darn ticked off at Alvin Bragg for this timing.
Maybe that's why the outstate money has been so much for Janet, because there's not a lot going on nationally.
Yes.
That, a lot of people who got, money on the left have nowhere to put the money. And so that, kind of boosted, fundraising dollars. But again, if this wasn't a shot in the arm for Dan Kelly, and this is something that he can actually talk about, the overreach in the place of where judges and prosecutors are, and you need to always adhere to the Constitution. But yeah, every paper you can imagine is going to have Donald Trump indictment plastered the next 4 days.
And then, of course, Senator Ron Johnson just slammed the indictment. U.S. Rep Scott Fitzgerald called it the weaponization of our government. That just ran in 35 minutes ago. You see it on JS Online. So definitely a lot more comments from conservatives, and that's going to fire people up even more, because it definitely is, I think, a weaponization.
Yep.
I mean, you're right. It's just going to crowd everything else out, right? And potentially energize Trump voters, which obviously helps Dan Kelly.
Right.
So it is a nightmare, I think, for Janet. People, I almost called him Janet.
I was going to say, you almost said Pivo Varchek.
Literally almost called her Janet.
That's your cousin. Jim, is that your cousin? That's your cousin, Jim.
Oh, Jim, is that your nightmare or what?
Oh,
you wake up in the morning next to Janet.
No, that's where you gnaw the arm off.
Those Polish names, I can't keep them straight. Oh my gosh. I'm never going to live that one down.
No, you're not.
Is that Jim? Matthew Ellen wants to know she's your aunt.
Oh, God.
Hey, what did you guys think of our Margaret Hudson story? This is a story. I know it'll totally get crowded out now by the Trump stuff, but this was a really important story, I thought, because it was a story about how Janet, when she was a prosecutor, she fought tooth and nail to take two African-American twin boys. They were 5 years old, from their grandmother, to put them with, I'm just going to say like it is, a white single woman who lived on Milwaukee's South Side. And this was a case Jim and I exhaustively reported and wrote about. We thought it was a pretty shocking case. This is a grandmother that had no history of child abuse or neglect, that had no criminal history. She had a good job. She'd raised a number of other children, and in fact, she was raising, I think, 5 of them at the time, other children of her children, her grandkids. And so the core argument to take these twins from this grandmother was that she didn't have a bigger house. And so then even after she went and got one, scrimped and saved for 3 years as this wound through the court system, even after she got a bigger house, Janet still went to the state Supreme Court, arguing tooth and nail to strip this woman's children or grandchildren from her and from the family. And ultimately, it got thrown back to Milwaukee courts, and they were given to the foster mother, had a difficult life, and ended up back with the blood family at age 13. We found this case because I believe it's the only case that Janet ever argued before the state Supreme Court. So Jim and I thought, well, we wanted to see what happened in that case. We spent like a week looking into it, talking to everybody. What did everybody think about that story?
I thought it was horrible. I know that, you know, in our, like, as I stated, both of my parents are from the South and they were raised in, you know, large families, and it was nothing to have 6 kids in a 2 or 3 bedroom. And if that's the only reason to find not to give these children, these twins, to the grandmother, I think it's pretty pathetic, because I always thought that the courts and the social workers that work with child protective services always wanted kids with the family. And I just think, you know, she was just being cruel. And I think that former Sheriff David Clark said it, but I also felt the same way too, that this is just like during slavery, when children were stripped from their families, their mothers, or their fathers, and sent somewhere else and separated. And there was no reason for her to interject in that situation. I won't understand it. But it's interesting that, you know, you tie that story back to the story with the racial slurs and the mention of the drug wars in the Central City, and then use of the N-word, like you had stated. It's around the same time that this case had taken place. And what's even more scary, because you were able to trace this case, other cases are confidential. How many other situations did she do this in? And, you know, people don't want to come forward, or it's too painful to come forward. I just think it just does not set right in my spirit. You know, and in this town hall meeting that the NAACP had, try to ask a question about things, and this comes up and you're just totally ignored. It's very disheartening and angering, because I think people deserve an explanation. I mean, even when you have someone like Tori Lowe, radio show host from Truth 107, even think it's horrible, and that these twins were harmed, because at 5 years old, even though their mother was battling addiction, their grandmother was the closest thing that they had to a mother, the closest connection. And just to be stripped of that by some DA who doesn't even care, I just think it goes beyond cruel. And someone like that was not fit as an ADA, is not fit to be a county judge, and is certainly not fit to be a state Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, we looked through the court records. We talked to all kinds of people trying to find, like, what was the rationale that Janet used. And, you know, initially it's this argument, and psychologists backed up or whatever, that, you know, the house was too small. And so, okay, I guess, like, there were 5 other kids in it. But then the grandmother scrimps and saves and manages to get a bigger house. And that's not good enough for Janet. I couldn't follow the rationale, like the line of thinking. Then it just switched up on this grandmother. Then it became, you know, the twins are doing better with the foster mother. It's bad to rip them out of the foster mother's home and, you know, introduce more instability into their life. It almost becomes a catch-22 for families, whereby it takes so long to fight it that then the system turns around and goes, well, the kids are bonded to the foster mother now, and it would be bad for them to take them away from her. And it's sort of like, well, you've been fighting this for years. You know what I mean?
Let's talk about the expense too, right? The state has unlimited resources to fight and try to take the children away. Yeah. And you have a family most likely in poverty or not very well off. How much money are they expected to come up with to fight these district attorneys, you know, who have unlimited funds? And the other point I'd like to make, you know, she obtained this 6-bedroom house. She put the offer to purchase in at the time they were notified that the boys were going to be put up for adoption, and she closed on a house the next month. These boys were only with the white mother for roughly a month before she got the 6-bedroom house. So to make the argument, while they're now connected to the mother, is ridiculous. I mean, how's that any different than a foster home? Look at like a foster. Sure, they stayed there for a month, but now give it to the grandmother who now purchased a 6-bedroom house.
There was also an aunt.
She's just a weird personality. She's done, you guys have reported several things that to me indicate she is a fundamentally bad person. She is not a good person. Real quick, I wanted to make a point that we did not have a lot of money as a family. We grew up in a 2-bedroom flat for most of our lives. 6 of us. My parents slept on the couch. By those standards, Janet would have taken all 4 of us away from my parents because we didn't live in a huge house. Apparently, like it wouldn't have been good enough for her. And we were Hispanic. And she also said Hispanic slurs too. She's not a big fan of Hispanics. So, I mean, she's petty. I think what she did with her ex, who she had been married to for less than a year, and he had been married to his previous wife for over 30 years, that she went to war over a grave plot because she was determined to be buried next to her the mother of the children of the guy she was married to. She's petty and vindictive. Mm-hmm. And I think she's a racist too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, I think it's just reeks of white liberal women or white liberals, period. They have a God complex. They know best for the underserved and the poor. Charlotte said that she and her family would have been separated. Based on Janet's equation, the entire half of Milwaukee during that time would be in foster care. Right. Half the city was the same way. Right. We all came up from the South.
Right.
We had to script together, and that's how you started wealth building, is when you kind of combined your resources. We used hand-me-down clothes. We all, we slept 2 on the bed. We had bunk beds. We had pallets. We slept on the couch. So to sit there, I guess all the farmers in the rural communities, I guess they could be out of the place too. They had 11 kids in one house.
Right. Exactly.
This whole idea of, well, I'm sorry, Master Janet, we ain't got a big enough house for you, So I guess it makes no sense. She's shows someone who has very poor judgment. Like the people that should get like jail time, she frees them. But the ones who should get like probation or help, like this family, she kind of puts the metal to the ground on them. I can't follow her. I can't follow her reasoning, her logic. That's why having a constitutionalist is so important, because what Janet does, she's shown she does things based on her feelings, her emotion, or how she thinks. Not like what's the case study here? What does the law say? And she's interjecting herself because it's the way Janet thinks. Janet is very controlling. And Janet likes to be in charge, and she got a problem with old white men. It seems like to me too.
Yeah, she likes to beat up her elderly husband. How are these stories playing in the Black community in Milwaukee?
Allegedly.
Allegedly? Are these stories getting? I know that. Are these getting heard? Are these getting any play in the Black community, in the Hispanic community? I know I'm not as connected. My mom and I and some cousins, we're trying to get this around the kind of person she is. Do you have any clue how, I mean, I don't think she's likable.
Well, for me, you can't tell, but I'm at the barbershop at least twice a month. And I can tell I think things are changing. I think that the Mortis, even to your point, Nick and Jessica, that Tory Lowe, who I don't always agree with on most things, brought up, and he's more concerned about the victims. I would love to see where is Tory? Well, Tory's already, but where's Vaughn? Where's the NAACP? Where everybody about all the families? Separation of families, and where's the protest for these children? And railing against the foster care system or the CPS. So I would love to see where they are, but I think right now, the sad truth about it, man, I'll be honest with you, is that this is the hurdle that we just have to have a realistic conversation about. You have a lot of minorities, Black people in particular, will still vote for somebody who uses the N-word, but calls themselves down for black people before they vote for a so-called white Republican who's a racist.
It all goes to the buzzwords they use in the media, the mischaracterizations of her opponent of Justice Kelly, because in the NAACP meeting or town hall, they use her supporters, her people that works on her campaign were using that as a way to downgrade him, extremists, and basically mischaracterizations. And I don't know how many times Justice Kelly got to say, even back when he was appointed by Scott Walker, I go, regardless of my beliefs, I'm always going to go by the law. He said that continuously since then, back then, and even now. So they're still going to vote for her. What's a few N-words? We get our rights, Act 10, the union, and we get our reproductive rights back. Who cares about a racial slur and abuse?
Do you think people in the community have learned that she's accused of using racial slurs? I mean, I know Tory Lowe did talk about it 2 shows in a row. I think he has pretty big reach, but of course, the Milwaukee media have attempted to censor that information from the community. Like local TV has just completely censored it. Do you think that word has gotten out?
I don't think that has gotten out. As I think Tory's done, did something. I would love to see what Sharon Hughes and the rest of the personalities on that network kind of, what do they say? Where is the community journal? What's the other the journal time, the black newspapers? Where are they at on this issue? Right? They're everywhere. They want to be on conservatives, but where are they at with somebody who they beloved, a so-called their black fighter who's using the N word around, using the B word allegedly? And let's toss it back allegedly, so there's definitely I don't think you can ever say that this is a fair media anymore. They black this whole thing out. They try to downplay and suppress as much as possible. And you still have black activists and black liberals and white liberals still trying to say, well, that's okay, because she's still down with us. Right. Because she's still better than those white Republicans, but they're racist. Well, what do you call this white liberal? Did she just not call you? That's like the highest level of disrespect. Like they don't move now. Well, she's still, he ain't a Republican.
Right.
Wow.
And go
ahead.
Let's remember that in her application to be a judge to Scott Walker, she literally discussed this whole issue, this case. She called it very fulfilling experience and rewarding.
Jim, you should put Margaret's picture back on screen. This is the most sympathetic grandmother like you could possibly find. My cat and my dog are fighting in the background. If you hear that, I don't know if you guys can hear. Stop it now. Just the most sympathetic grandmother. Just a ferocious spirit. This grandmother. She dropped a few F-bombs talking to Jim and I. She's a tough cookie, let me tell you.
Well,
and
the problem is, I think that's so deep, is that this is that misinformation of like history, revisionist history. A lot of black people, like the grandma, don't like white people, period. The problem is white liberals have been able to cloak themselves and not really show their real hand, because they're closer to black people. And it goes down the Marxist ideas of, how America's, systemically racist, how every white cop gotta be a racist, every white man's a racist. But we never go deep enough. And this is one of the things I do respect about Tory Lowe, that he said he don't like either Republicans or Democrats, but I always ask the black activists, when they get mad about, drugs and crime in the street, they never go as far as want to call out the people who are actually behind the policy making here in the city. They always say, well, the Republicans, well, white people. Well, which white people are you talking about? Which white folk are you talking about?
Well, and then there's this notion, because Tory said this, I think, or people on his show said, there's this notion everyone's the same. And then, of course, Dan Kelly must be a racist too. He must have used the N-word too. So it's all a wash. That was sort of the line that we heard on the show. And I was thinking, like, first of all, it's really unfair. Like, I mean, there's no evidence he's ever done anything racist or said anything racist. And then they're like, oh, everyone says it all the time. Like conservatives say this word all the time. And I was talking to Jim and I said, and I mean this honestly, like I have actually never heard anyone say that word, that racial slur, other than in music and on TV or movies or whatever. I have never heard anybody in person say the word. Maybe it's common in the South or I don't know, but I haven't. And so this idea that I don't know where this has been perpetrated, that, you know, conservatives are all running around making racist slurs is just, it's
Well,
not
Jessica,
true.
tell me this, you all. Do you all remember when, you know, and I've got some respect for her. I'll just put it out there like that. But then I think I want to say mayoral candidate Lena Taylor was called out for calling a black teller, and it was a big old thing because Lena said the N word.
I remember that.
She said
Oh,
house in. She got mad about they wouldn't check if there was money on an account or something before she cashed the check, and she got mad and she called the teller a house in.
I remember that story. We reached out.
Judge too.
We reached out to Lena Taylor and asked for comment on the Margaret Hudson story and on the racial slur allegations against Janet Protasewicz, and did not. Well, her staff member wrote back and said she's too busy to talk. I said, okay, how about tomorrow? And then tomorrow came, and again he said she's too busy to talk.
I just find it interesting, you know, again, how that black woman was blasted in the media because she's not a darling of the Democratic Party and she's not a darling of the left. Blasted her. She had to come up with a formal apology. She had to go all over the churches and, you know, I didn't mean it that way. But Janet, the white judge, well, we just go, okay, it's nothing. Allegedly, it's nothing. I just find it strange.
Well, you know what the Journal Sentinel did is they quoted her former stepson as saying that he heard her use racial slurs, but they censored the fact that a second man who's not related to the Madden family also independently stated that he also heard her use racial slurs. So you have two people saying they heard this directly. And I thought it was very interesting. The Journal Sentinel tells you about this former stepson because he's the guy that Janet's trying to discredit, like, oh, he just has a gripe. He has this 31-year-old drug history or whatever. And then they censor the fact there's the second guy. So I wrote Greg Borowski, the editor of the Journal Sentinel. I said, why are you not telling people about John Eyre? And he just, no response. And Dan Bice wrote back and said, well, we're going on our reporting. I'm like, well, then call him up and ask him, because he'll tell you he heard the same thing. He's on audio saying
how the left picks and chooses. So now she wants to discredit the witness because, you know, he's a druggie. But then in the same vein, she'll say, well, some of these guys need a second and third chance who need to get probation. So Janet, you again, this is the rule of Janet now. This is how Janet like to do it. She do what she feel like she's doing. She has there's no kind of rhyme nor reason. You a good one, you a bad one. You know, so she can say, well, he's a recovering, druggie. You can't believe nothing he says. Really? But I thought
she called him a two-time felon and never had a job. That's what she called him.
And that's not true, by the way. Like, we asked Michael Madden, we said, is this true? Or he called it, I don't know. It's not true. Like, he cited about 10 jobs, right, Jim, that he's had over the years?
Right. Yeah, he was upset about that. Yeah, and I asked him, I have all the jobs. He cited them off for me. He's worked.
And then he told the Journal Sentinel, she said this about me and it's not true. He said, come over and I'll show you my tax returns to prove it. They weren't interested. They didn't correct the record.
And keep in mind, we have 6 witnesses or collaborating witnesses on the abuse allegations. We have a few eyewitnesses, and then we have other people that said, I remember hearing about her, being told about it at the time it was happening. I mean, that's 6. And here you have the Journal Sentinel going off on 2 anonymous sources when they went after Jennifer Dorrell's son, and yet they won't touch this.
I wonder how many black and brown families she separated because there was an alleged physical altercation with a parent and a child.
Or they didn't have a big enough house. Like, I'd love to scour more of her cases in children's court because she was there 18 years. She was doing very serious cases, termination, parental rights, children in need of protective services, and it's in the same era that she's allegedly dropping racial slurs. But they're very, very hard. My cat. They're very. Stop it. They're very hard to actually find out about because children's court cases are often sealed, or you only get the first name. And in fact, again, it's due to the ferociousness of this grandmother, Margaret Hudson, that we were able to find out about this one case. It's because she took it all the way to the Supreme Court that the opinion is published and you can find it. But even so, it took Jim and I days to track her down because in the court records and court file, she's just Margaret H. and the twins are Daryl and Darrell T.H. So you don't even have the last names to go by. But Jim and I figured it out. Like, to be honest with you, I said there's so many combinations of names here, and the twins' names are fairly unusual that I bet we can find them, like, through social media, and we did. And then we tried to track down their number, and we went to the, in city of Milwaukee, Jim and I, and we spent an afternoon knocking on doors to try to find this Margaret Hudson. It wasn't easy to do. So I would love to know what else is out there, but it's so difficult to find out what happened in children's court cases. But people like Tori Lowe, people who've dealt with this for years, say that it's incredibly common that this has happened to Black families for generations. It's appalling.
I want to raise an issue that, and this is from my own experience too. And after we did this story, it made me think back on the difference in the cultures I think that grandparents play. I know my parents aren't really around for my children, and they're off in a different state. And I know that's true for a lot of my friends. But the importance of grandparents within the Black community is so strong and enormous and necessary, especially in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the parents, ended up going to jail over crack. And so the grandparents took the children. And I remember several cases where, I would arrest a juvenile and I would tell them that, well, no, I'm not going to take you to the children's center. I'm going to take you home to grandma instead. And the look of the fear of God in their eyes that I was taking them to grandma, they're begging me to take them to the children's center instead because they knew what grandma would do when I brought them home to them. And that just made me remember when I look here at grandma, it reminds me of some of those grandmas I took the guys home to.
By the scruff of their neck, they probably grabbed them.
Yeah.
Brought them in the house.
But look at the grandparents raised so many of these kids during that time.
Yeah.
And a tribute to them, and they needed to be supported. And then how horrific. Then the system gave the white adoptive mother thousands of dollars apparently per month to have the kids. It's like, give it to the grandma, support her.
Can you imagine the mansion grandma could have bought for $2,000 a month back then? That 6-bedroom home, I think, went for $50,000. I mean,
just imagine what the financial strain that Janet put that family through, the grandmother, for 3 years to save the money.
Yeah.
From the other kids she was raising.
Yeah.
You took from them, so that has what she did to get the money, who knows, but just the financial stress and strain.
Yep.
Having that money to go buy another house because Miss Janet say the house ain't big enough. I'm sorry, Massa. It ain't big enough. I ain't live in a big house. I know y'all can't say it. I can.
I know you can say.
Well, it's a poverty test. It strikes me like a poverty test to keep your family intact.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Exactly what it is. Because again, half of the city would be, under Janet, we would all be. I mean, I worked in children's services and I understand because again, I'm from the culture. I understand what poverty does, but those children had a warm place to live at night with someone who loved them every day and had some beans and whatever they had, they did it was with love. Grandma was love and grandma loved them and they were around their kinfolk. In turn, your cousin is like your brother, you go around family and you make things. And back then, grandma may even have some beans growing in the backyard,
right?
Garden, but everybody knew everybody. So it was community. And this woman who thinks she knows best for poor Blacks, coming in and say, and then, like you said, took it to the Supreme. At no point did she say, as a mother, did it kick in and say, you know what, I'm just going to stop. None of that kicked in.
No.
None of that kicked in. Like, I'm just going to
She's
stop.
not a mother. She's
not
never
a
had kids.
She's not a mother.
And that to me,
Well, she had stepkids, I guess.
that's
Yeah,
part of the,
yeah,
that's
she
part
had-
of the issue.
How do you,
How do you have someone working in children's court and doesn't have any experience as a parent to say, okay, or a family? You know, I don't know where Janet's family is, but to say, yeah, my vacation was sleeping down south in St. Louis in a bed full of 4 other boys because all my cousins, we slept at my auntie house for summer vacation. It wasn't a vacation, but it was out of town. But hey, it was what we had. We shared one skate. You know, call ourselves skating around the neighborhood. We had one bike. You know, we all had to take turns and ride. You know, I mean, is that so? So the whole idea of we had beans in the morning, beans at lunch, and beans this happens sometimes. But it made us understand and appreciate, in my case, the greatness of God in my life and the greatness of this country.
Right.
yeah.
That's really well said, Orlando. I wish more people knew about Margaret Hudson's story. I wish Janet was being held more accountable for what she did to that family. Again, the twins went on to have a pretty difficult life with the foster mother or the adoptive mother. They actually were adopted. And then the way that the Blood family got them back is when they were 13, the aunt discovered that the adoptive mother had essentially dumped them off with her extended family for months, according to the aunt. And so the aunt found this out.
Paychecks, I'm sure.
Well, so the aunt found this out and swept in and then went back to court again and got them back. It's a terrible story. And also your point about there's this community, extended family around the children. I mean, that was the case here too. So this aunt is also an extraordinarily powerful woman, and her name's Denise. And she told Jim and I that, you know, my mother wasn't alone. The grandmother was not raising these kids alone. She said there was a village around the grandmother. The aunt lived very close by. The aunt would drive them around and so forth. It wasn't like it was only this grandmother either, but that was just disregarded by Janet or misunderstood by Janet. And then, like Jim said, then she goes and brags about the case to Scott Walker. But this is not a story anywhere else. Like, you know, it just shows that the media have done very incomplete biographies of Janet Protasiewicz.
Well,
let's put it that way.
I think she's very unlikable. She comes off that way. These stories all ring. This all rings true. You have plenty of documentation, and if you had the time, I'm sure there's a lot more to uncover. And there's only the two of you doing actual journalism in this race. But I don't know. I think that people vote instinctually, like what makes them come out to vote, they have to somewhat like someone. And I do think, and Mark Belling had said this today, that she is unlikable, and that probably is hurting her. I hope that there are more in Milwaukee, in Madison, that can get some of these stories, and maybe that's influencing them just to stay home, and that they just don't have the desire to go out and vote, even though they're told to by Democrats. They may choose to stay home. You know, I think these stories could have some impact.
I really wish Dan had the money to say some of these things, because I really believe if he had the money, or other groups had the money to actually go in on this, it would have an impact. To say, you know what? I mean, for all the covering that they did, they could have did Mitchell a better job. You know, at least he's shown some remorse, and his wife has come to grips with some things, and he could have, if you go do all this, at least his stuff was out there. You could, you know, he could be somebody that you might say, okay, it was rough, but this lady, and trying to project it, and to me again, she's trying to be on both sides. Oh, when she had the debate with Kelly, well, I like Scalia's. You like Scalia? Anthony Scalia's? She's like, he's one of my idols. Liberals, what are you saying, Libs? And was it Clarence Thomas also? I'm like, what are you talking about? Is she Come
It
on.
would be Mickey Mouse if she could get whatever she was looking for at the time. It could be Mickey Mouse, it could be Daffy, or it could be Donald. It doesn't even who knows with her.
At
She's a
least this was on the
shapeshifter.
Tory Lowe show, and I did listen to. I mean, he did give this a fair hearing. There were 2 segments that he talked about this. I think that was a very positive thing, but I can't even imagine if Dan Kelly had the money that Janet does, and if these all of that you've uncovered on Wisconsin right now, if those could have been the ads that you see every time you log on to CNN, or every time you log on to Fox News, or every time you're on YouTube, those running ads that the Pro Sandwich campaign can continually put up. I wish that was the case as well.
I
But
think that some of the positives is that we are being told that I think in the final stretch here, the last week, that Kelly is expected to outspend Janet. I think it's 3 million to 1. So I think there's still going to be quite a few ads going out the next few days, and let's hope they make an impact.
are they going to use any of your material in these ads?
We don't know. I mean, we don't know. I mean, I think they've doubled down from what I've been seeing on TV and online on this crime angle. Jim and I personally believe, that the crime angle is not enough. Like this weak sentencing angle, I think it's dented her, but I don't think it's enough. Like if we were running third-party groups, which we're not, like I would have done ads on these things. Yeah. I think it does all link together, sort of like you, Scarlett, and Orlando were saying, like it all sort of connects together, right? You've got the low sentences, but a lot of those cases, she was devaluing the voices of Black victims and the experiences of Black victims. Yeah, and then I thought Orlando made a great point, but she's letting some of these horrific rapists like walk out the door of the courthouse, and yet she's tooth and nail all in going after, Margaret Hudson. It's just bizarre. Then it links into the racial slur allegations. And, people want to discredit the former stepson. Jim and I found him to be very candid and forthright.
Yeah.
And he didn't seek out the media. Let's remember this. The Madden family did not seek out the media. There was a random door knocker for Dan Knodl that knocked randomly on Michael Madden's door and started talking about the Supreme Court race. And then, Michael said, well, I lived with her. I would never vote for her. I had this bad experience. And the door knocker told someone. It eventually got to Jim and I. We didn't even know what Michael Madden was going to say. We didn't even know his name. We just heard that a former stepson didn't like her. We found the obituary of Judge Madden, and then we figured out which son it was. We tracked down the address, and we literally cold called him. So these individuals did not seek out the media. I think it's really unfair to just paint Michael Madden as somehow prima facie non-credible because he has a 31-year-old drug history. I mean, I think it needs to be mentioned so people know that in assessing his credibility, but I don't think it inherently makes him a liar. In fact, I would question, why is it that Janet has such an awful relationship with the family of her former husband, right? I mean, doesn't that say something about what went down, frankly?
Yeah. And these kinds of ads, I think there were some comments that he's taking the higher road, and I get that. The kind of ads that we're discussing, where 1 week, if you just took one of your stories and 1 week you focused on the allegations that she slaps around her elderly husband, and there were 2 credible witnesses. There was the stepson, but then his recollection, 2 stepsons, and then there was somebody who also corroborated that. And then every week you could have had a different one of these stories come out, and it's a third party group typically would be doing these kinds of ads that are attacking Janet. And in the future, like, who knows, maybe over 2024, there's more funding to take the stories that you do and turn them into third party ads, political expenditures that would, I think that they would be far better than some of the other ads that I've seen. And I think to mention the crime angle is very good, but it isn't enough. It isn't enough. It's just that was sort of our 2022 theme, and I know it carries on to now, and I know it matters. It matters a lot, but get at her character. Allegations that she hit her elderly husband. She's petty and vindictive about a grave plot. She uses racial slurs. This horrible
Allegedly.
the grandmother.
So
Yeah,
right.
allegedly.
So and Robert, you and I agree on this point.
Oh.
Typically Supreme Court justices don't sentence people at all. So the sentencing that she gave to people, although it shows her character, it's not really relevant. What I would have liked to have seen is a little bit more of a push. We were told door knockers were going and knocking on elderly people's doors, and those people were concerned about the abortion issue and actually believed that women had the right to choose. And I thought to myself, why aren't we exposing the Act 10 thing a little bit more? If we lose Act 10, you go to those elderly people now and you say, hey, if Act 10 is overturned, your property taxes are going up 50%.
Yes.
Watch them all of a sudden their eyes go, wait a minute, what's going on? And I think that's something we should have pushed a little harder.
Yeah.
So Jim's been making that. He's been making that point to me for like 2 weeks, or like they should have done a pocketbook ad campaign. I thought that was a brilliant point. Right. I mean, people take Act 10 for granted. Like, people, I think, aren't keying into and understanding that will probably be found unconstitutional if Janet is elected to the court. And then to explain, and ads could have explained to people exactly what Jim just said, elderly people on fixed incomes, what that will mean for them. And I did want to add one little nuance to the debate, though, about crime. I do think that a Supreme Court justice, the Supreme Court, does play a role on criminal issues. There are issues that come before the court that relate to the rights of criminal defendants, the powers of police, police procedure, Miranda rights, interrogations, what's an articulable reason for a traffic stop, like all of these kinds of issues do come before the court. And I think we could expect a new liberal controlled court would expand the rights of criminal defendants in this state at the expense of the powers of law enforcement.
We got this message. I just put up to Stephanie so I can, I asked her a little while ago if she wanted to come on, but I found this shocking. She's saying, and I believe I think she's the chairman of Door County Republican Party.
Yes.
She's saying that the campaign sent our articles on the allegations against Janet to all county chairmen, but for various reasons, they are not wanting to use those talking points in ads.
Well, I can speak to that. I mean, we have talked to enough people that it's become very clear to us that it's the candidate that is the issue there. And he came on our podcast, Dan Kelly, and he said he believes the allegations are credible. So it's not that, right? It's not that he's worried they're not credible. They're exhaustively reported. But there's something about his sense of decorum, his personality. I guess it was just communicated to us that he wants to keep the race on judicial policies and procedures and issues like the judicial process, the constitutional questions. This is Dan Kelly. I mean, this is who he is. This is a man of great decorum, great class. I was blown away, impressed by him when he came on our podcast. I think he's a fundamentally decent man. Maybe that's getting a little bit in the way of what needs to be done here, because I personally don't think it's a matter of decency. I think that the voters have a right to know that these allegations exist. And I believe that if they were being made against Dan Kelly, they would be front page news all over the state, on every television station, and every newspaper's front page for weeks. So I think it's a gross double standard. And it's an issue, though. He won't fully take the gloves off. That is on the candidate. Yeah,
except, Jessica, Stephanie's saying it's the campaign that sent the articles. It's a Dan Kelly.
But that they're not willing to put the allegations in ads, though.
Right. Well, right.
Well, what
but isn't that why the campaign would send it? Would be to hope that the county chairman would put them on ads?
Well, I mean, I guess they're willing to spread it, but not go full frontal adder on it, where the candidate has to come out and.
The third party, and I get what you're saying, Jessica, that it would have been great coming from him, and the third party, hopefully you'll see something in the next 48 hours from some of these third parties who who are willing to do it. I think we as a conservative movement have a deeper issue that we have to address, and I think we have to use a different litmus test, and it's hard to articulate. Like, who's the most electable and who's the most conservative? Those are two different people. And I think we need to have an education on, like, what do you want? I think in a red county, typically the most conservative is the most electable. But running statewide, is the most electable person the most conservative? That's a question we have to ask ourselves.
Right.
You think it depends if I've thought about this question a lot too and gone back and forth. And I think it depends if there's truly an ability to get crossover voters and if that's the strategy, or if the strategy is just get out the vote. So if the strategy is a get out the vote strategy, get out the base, right? A get out the base strategy, then perhaps Dan Kelly has the best chance to do that, to rally and motivate like the hardcore base to come out and vote in a low turnout spring election. There is that argument. I wrestled with the question. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Well, there was a famous quote. I forgot who said this, but there's a famous quote that you want to support the most conservative candidate who can win, right? That's what you were referring to, I think.
Right. I think it was, I think Freeman said that?
Someone like that. I don't remember.
The most electable. Whoever's the most, you elect the most conservative person who can win. So I think we have to decide. We have to decide as a movement what we want. But I do believe they are different candidates, and we need to, and that needs to be something that we need to articulate to people. One of the things that Mark Belling did say, and I wasn't always a fan of this approach, was stop trying to get this soft middle of 3% of these independents. You'll never win them over because their issue always changes daily. You can't really campaign to them. If you turn toward the base, and this is what I think Trump was successful of doing, was turning toward the base of getting people who are already conservative, but may not like politicians that much. I've been harping on this for a while now, is stop talking politician and talk policy. Make the policy make sense to the people. And I think you have a better chance of winning over people who maybe don't like politicians, but if you make the policy make sense, to Jim's point, if you take away Act 10, how does Act 10 impact your mortgage payments? How does Act 10 impact your rent payments? Make it make sense to people. Stop pushing the person and push the policy.
Yeah.
Well, one thing Tim Michaels never did in the fall was run an economic argument. Like, I can't even tell you this to this day what his core economic message was. And that was a big problem. You remember James Carville saying in The War Room, or whatever the documentary was called, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it's still the economy, stupid. So I thought Jim's point was brilliant on the Act 10 angle, and it's been talked about, but not enough to break through, I think. Should have been defining of this race.
It's one of those issues, I think, with the new chairman and these new boards are popping up across the state. I think there's going to have to be a new strategy moving forward. Whatever happens on next week, Tuesday night, we're going to have to go back in and go back to the war room and figure out a strategy of, combining the patriot groups and the typical GOP. And when we say grassroots, or you mean GOP grassroots, or you're talking about patriot grassroots, or are you talking about people who are conservatives who are not part of the patriot groups nor the GOP, but they just vote? I got a chance. I'll say the statement again. I got a chance to meet the good old boys. I met them when I was on the campaign trail. They wasn't at the patriot group, event, and they wasn't at the GOP event, but they showed up was at the tractor pull. Showing up was at the country concert. They was definitely there, but how do we tap into that? And I think that may be where the Belling angle was coming from. Like, if you tap into that, and I think that's what Trump did, you don't have to worry about this squishy independent voter because they change so much. They so finicky. How do you really campaign for them? I mean, I think one of the sayings is that, most independents, they probably break toward the person who sounds as if they have the most on the ball plan. And so they may not know themselves until election day who they're voting for. But if you can tap into some of them boys in the back of the woods, yes, they want to vote. I mean, well, if you can I think Tom Tiffany said this, and I think we said I put this out there, and I don't exactly know how he got the number, but he said it's close to 100,000 hunters who didn't vote, right? 100,000. If the hunter didn't vote, more than likely he's married, and there's a good chance she didn't vote either. If it's a couple, that means the kid didn't vote either. So we're losing, votes that are on the table, but we don't have the ability to connect with them. I think there is definitely I think, from my, city conservative African American eye that I didn't know until I got out of Milwaukee County, it was really bright for me to see, like, oh, there's clearly a difference between the white collar and the blue collar conservative. Clearly. There's clearly a difference between the religious right and, let's say, the Chamber of Commerce right or the national security right. It's a big tent. The question is, are you willing to lose a little bit here or there to grow it? And that's the question that we as conservatives have to decide.
Well, we're also getting outspent every election, and that can't keep happening if conservatives want to win. Eric Toney was outspent in the attorney general's race 5-1. Michaels was outspent by millions and millions of dollars. Jim had shown me some numbers that did show that Dan Kelly and the third party groups are spending at a rate closer to Janet than people think. I think there's this perception that he's been wildly outspent, but it was interesting to see, Jim, that wasn't quite true, right?
Yeah.
So maybe yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to try to pull up the numbers right now. I heard today that they're now anticipating this race to cost a total of $35 million, which is going to be the highest price state Supreme Court race in the country's history. $35 million.
That's crazy.
Wow.
What's the spending breakdown? Do you have it, Jim?
Yeah, right now. Oh yeah, here. How about let me just bring this up here.
Yeah, I think I put it on my wall. I shared it. If you want to find it that way, I put it on my wall. I think I shared your post actually.
Yeah.
That's probably on your wall then, because I shared it. I think it was interesting. I mean, people think that she's wildly outspending him. It's not exactly true. I think Dick Uihlein has dumped millions into this race, which helped even it out. Because I'll say it again, we can't keep getting outspent on the right and expect to win races, statewide races. It doesn't happen. You're not going to get outspent by millions of dollars and win. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who's all these people? Are these all your friends, Jim?
No, I'm trying to get in.
I know, I'm teasing.
I'm trying to pull up the clip for you here on my Facebook page.
Yeah, because it's really interesting.
Yeah.
With some really interesting data.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jessica, that we have to do a better job of investing in races. The concern, and this is the mind of the conservative, is the return on investment. So the liberal has a different engine on how they spend money and why they spend money. Conservatives have a different rationale, and it goes back to that business idea. I mean, what's the return on investment? And that's hard.
Well, you've got these coastal elites and celebrities who are exploiting this change in the law in which gazillionaires from other states can give, I believe, unlimited money to the state party, and then they can turn around and give it to a candidate. Yeah, I was told, I don't know much about it, but I was told that Scott Walker pushed through that change to benefit his presidential run, and the Democrats have put it on steroids, and they get this coastal elite money, big tech, liberal millionaires from LA and stuff like that are dumping money into the state party. There was this breakdown of spending and how much of it was from in-state people versus out of state, which is very interesting. The media haven't told people that story, how much she's being funded by people from outside of Wisconsin, which is not the case with Dan Kelly as much.
It's like that's most of her money. It's from outside of Wisconsin.
Jim, can you put that back up so people can see it?
Yeah, it's kind of small. I don't know if anyone can see that or not.
My eyesight sucks. Maybe you can read it. I'm curious the numbers.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to expand that here. Oh, maybe I can do this. Oh, wait, hang on. Can I go?
Janet, third party.
Yeah. So, anyways, Janet, third party is at 11.2 million total, and yeah, I'm sorry, Jessica, it's just not going to work here.
Oh, okay. Well, it showed
and-
them a lot closer than people think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's only $1 million off. It was like $11 million for Janet and $10 million for Dan Kelly. So I mean, it's only $1 million off. It's really
So
close.
why do we see? Why are we seeing? Why does it seem like we're seeing more of her ads then?
It's a good question.
That's a good
I
question.
don't watch regular TV, so I guess I don't actually know if I'm seeing a lot of her ads, but maybe it's mythology, but like we keep hearing that people keep saying that they watch TV and they don't see his ads. They just see her ads, but I don't know what to say.
Well, I
Maybe
can
they're
tell
not
you-
focusing on this market. I don't know.
I can tell you as a volunteer working at one of the local campaign offices, when I do make the phone calls, one of the things I hear from a lot of people, and they say it all the time, I'm so sick of seeing both of these ads. So maybe maybe it is, coming out there. It's like, I'm so sick of
Maybe.
seeing both.
I was watching.
We've heard people. Sorry. We've heard people talking about no jail Janet, and like we've heard people in the city of Milwaukee talking about those ads. It's broken through that she's a weak sentencer.
Yes, those ads have been going nonstop on like Discovery ID. Like I stream it. Well, I have Spectrum, and so watching Discovery ID, they have a commercial break, and they've been running her no jail, the light sentences repeatedly. Because I've been actually seeing more ads related supporting Justice Kelly than I have actually pro-Desaic. So I mean, I guess maybe it depends on what you're watching, and again, the audience, that they're trying to reach.
Well, also to what you said earlier about Kelly's spending is picking up. Maybe some of those spaces, more available now that he put his money toward the back end of the campaign. And so now he has more slots that he's paying for. Early on, Janet was using on the front end and build up momentum, but maybe on the back end, more slots are available, and he's filling those slots.
Yeah.
He's peaking at the right time, right? Someone said that to me. In politics, you want to peak at the right time. She peaked on the front end. He's peaking now. Will it be enough to push him over the line? I don't know. I mean, it's close. And with the Trump indictment, there's some fuel on the fire there to get people out to the polls. I don't know. It's a turnout game. I think really down to the end here, it's a turnout game. So you guys know who came up with no jail Janet, right?
I don't know who came up with that. If it's
we did.
Oh yeah,
did. I think I was actually going with no prison pro-Desaic.
Yeah.
Right, Jim?
Yeah.
And then someone on Twitter was like, yeah, no jail Janet. So maybe it was someone on Twitter. And then I started putting out, and Jim started putting out no jail Janet. And now it's in all these commercials.
It's funny. Often the last couple of years, there's been a few times Jessica will make up a term as we're working on a story. She'll make up a term, and I'll laugh at her like, that doesn't even exist. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And we'll write it and we'll put it in the story. And no kidding, 2 weeks later, it's all in the news and everyone's using that term. So
universal school choice was one term I think I made up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or force strength. That was another
force
term.
Force strength was one too. Yeah.
Jim's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the force strength of the MPD. Universal school choice. I thought that was a word. I don't know. It means school choice for everybody.
Right.
Good.
My cat, I'm ready to just, oh my goodness, this cat. I had my pets locked out of this room, so they wouldn't bother me. And then they were both caterwauling and pawing at the door endlessly. They tolerated it for about 2 hours, and then they wanted to come in. They're making such a racket. I let them both in the room, and now you wouldn't believe what this cat is doing. He keeps
all right. Well, that's maybe a good time
my
to
camera, and if
it's almost midnight. It's almost midnight.
Yeah, maybe that's a good time to bring it to an end here. If we're talking about
you guys realize we've talked so long. Yeah, that we're now talking about my cat. Like we have talked so long that we could have flown to Europe by now.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not quite. We'd be somewhere over the Atlantic, I guess.
All right. Very well. Nick, I thought you did a great job tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Yes,
you. I got over my
great
shyness really quick.
Yeah, well, we'll do it
We
again.
should have Nick and Orlando back. I love you guys.
Yeah, I
No,
thought you
you
guys,
guys
it
are
was
great.
great. Great talk.
Thank
Appreciate
Really
it.
great.
It was
Really
fun,
great.
Orlando.
Definitely have them back.
Yeah. this
Very
is
good.
Definitely.
All
We
right, guys.
covered a lot of ground.
Yes.
We did. All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good, everybody. Go vote if you haven't.
I'm going tomorrow.
And if you
Yeah,
have
me too.
more people.
I'm going out of state next week, so I got to go vote tomorrow too.
Absolutely. I'm taking people I know.
Yes. Good job. That's exactly
Yeah, I gotta go vote. Good night, everybody.
right.